Victoria's hand crashed across Zoe's face with a crack that echoed through the funeral silence. "Don't you ever say your father's name in my house again." The 8-year-old stumbled backward, her brown cheek already swelling red. Her twin sister Maya caught her before she hit the ground. The funeral guests froze. No one moved. No one spoke. Victoria grabbed a cardboard box and hurled their belongings onto the lawn. "Get out. Both of you. Your kind has no place here anymore." The 2 little black girls stood on the porch of the only home they had ever known, watching their white stepmother throw away their entire lives. They had nowhere to go, no family, no hope, until a man who had been watching from across the street finally stepped out of the shadows. Before we continue, subscribe to my channel and follow this story to the very end. Comment below which city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. Now let us begin. The slap came without warning. One moment Zoe was standing on the porch, clutching her mother's old doll against her chest. The next moment her head snapped sideways and she was falling, her small body crumpling like paper in the wind. Maya caught her sister before she hit the wooden boards. She felt Zoe trembling in her arms, felt the hot tears soaking through her funeral dress, felt her own heart pounding so hard it hurt to breathe. "What did you do?" Maya screamed at the woman standing over them. "What did you do to my sister?" Victoria Ellis looked down at the 2 girls with eyes that held nothing. No warmth, no guilt, no humanity, just cold, calculated satisfaction. "I did what I should have done 5 years ago." Victoria's voice was flat, matter-of-fact, like she was discussing the weather. "The moment your father brought me into this house, I knew I would have to get rid of you eventually. I just had to wait for the right time." Maya's blood turned to ice. "Get rid of us? Did you think I married Marcus because I loved him?" Victoria laughed and the sound made Maya's skin crawl. "I married him for this house, for his money, for everything he built, and now that he's finally dead, I don't have to pretend anymore." She bent down until her face was inches from Maya's. The smell of expensive perfume mixed with something sour underneath something rotten. "Your father was weak. He actually believed I cared about his little orphan daughters. He actually thought I would raise you like my own children." Victoria's lips curled into a sneer. "But I'm not weak, and I'm certainly not going to waste another day of my life playing mother to 2 pickaninnies who aren't worth the food I've been forced to put on their plates." The word hit Maya like a second slap. She had heard it before, whispered behind her back, at school, shouted from passing cars, muttered by strangers who thought she couldn't hear. But she had never heard it from someone who was supposed to be family. "You can't call us that," Maya whispered. "Daddy said you would never Your daddy is dead." Victoria grabbed Maya's chin and forced her head up. "He's lying in a box in the ground, and he can't protect you anymore. No one can protect you anymore. Do you understand me? No one." She released Maya with a shove that sent both girls sprawling across the porch. "You have 10 minutes to get your things and get off my property. If you're still here when I come back outside, I'll call the police and tell them you're trespassing." The screen door slammed behind her so hard that the hinges rattled. For a long moment, the only sound was Zoe's sobbing. Maya held her sister tight, her mind racing, her heart breaking, her whole world collapsing around her. "Maya," Zoe's voice was barely a whisper. "Maya, she hit me. She really hit me. I know, baby, I know. Daddy said she would never hurt us. He promised. He looked me right in the eyes, and he promised." Maya didn't know what to say. Their father had promised many things. He had promised to always be there for them. He had promised that Victoria would take care of them. He had promised that they would always have a home. But their father was gone now, and all his promises had been buried with him. "We have to pack," Maya said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "We have to get our things before she comes back." "Pack?" Zoe looked up at her sister with red, swollen eyes. "Maya, where are we going to go?" It was the question Maya had been trying not to ask herself. They had no other family. Their mother's parents had died before they were born. Their father's mother was in a nursing home in Atlanta, her mind so far gone she didn't recognize anyone anymore. There was no one else. There was nowhere else. "We'll figure it out," Maya said, because that was what their father always said when things got hard. "We'll figure it out together." She helped Zoe to her feet and checked her sister's face. The red mark was already darkening into a bruise that spread across her cheekbone like a stain. Maya's hands shook with rage as she touched it gently. "Does it hurt?" Zoe nodded, her lower lip trembling. "I'm going to make her pay for this," Maya whispered. "I don't know how, but I'm going to make her pay." The front door banged open again. Victoria stood in the doorway, a cardboard box in her arms. Without a word, she hurled it onto the porch. Clothes exploded across the wooden boards. Books scattered. Toys rolled toward the steps. "There's your junk," Victoria said. I've been wanting to clean out that room for years." Another box followed. Then another. Then a garbage bag that split open on impact, sending underwear and socks flying in all directions. Maya watched everything they owned come raining down around them. Their school uniforms, their Sunday dresses, the matching pajamas their father had bought them for Christmas, the stuffed animals they had slept with since they were babies. And then Victoria threw out the photo albums. Maya dove for them, her fingers closing around the leather binding just before it could slide off the edge of the porch. Inside were the only pictures they had of their mother, the only proof that she had ever existed at all. "Please," Maya begged, clutching the album to her chest. "Please, can we at least have a suitcase, something to carry our things?" Victoria considered this for a moment, her head tilted to one side like a bird examining a worm. "Fine." She disappeared inside and returned with a battered old suitcase, the kind with a broken wheel and a zipper that didn't close all the way. She dropped it at Maya's feet. "Your father never could throw anything away. He was sentimental like that. Weak." "Our daddy wasn't weak," Zoe said suddenly, her voice cracking but fierce. "He was the strongest person in the whole world." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "What did you say to me?" "I said our daddy wasn't weak. He was good and kind, and he loved us more than anything. And you—" Zoe's voice rose, fueled by grief and anger and the desperate courage of a child who has nothing left to lose. "You're mean and ugly, and I hate you, I hate you." Victoria moved so fast that Maya barely saw it. One moment she was standing in the doorway. The next moment she had Zoe by the arm, her fingers digging into the soft flesh hard enough to leave marks. "Listen to me, you little brat." Victoria's voice was low and dangerous. "Your father is dead. Your mother is dead. You have no one in this world who gives a damn whether you live or die. And if you ever speak to me like that again, I will make sure that the rest of your miserable life is spent in a group home where no one will ever love you. Do you understand me?" Zoe whimpered, tears streaming down her face. "I said, do you understand me?" "Yes," Zoe whispered. "Yes, I understand." Victoria released her arm with a shove. 8 minutes. I suggest you start packing." She went back inside, and this time Maya heard the deadbolt slide into place. Zoe collapsed against her sister, sobbing. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Now she's going to send us away. She's going to send us to a group home, and we'll never see each other again." "No." Maya wrapped her arms around her sister and held on tight. "No, that's not going to happen. I won't let it happen. We're going to stay together no matter what. I promise you, Zoe. I promise on Mama's grave and Daddy's grave and everything holy. We will never be separated. Never." They packed in silence after that, working as fast as they could with trembling hands. Maya folded clothes while Zoe gathered books. They stuffed everything they could into the broken suitcase and piled the rest into the plastic bags that had blown onto the porch. The photo albums, the Bible that had belonged to their mother, Zoe's doll with its brown skin and curly hair. These things Maya packed with extra care, wrapping them in clothes to protect them from damage. When they were done, they sat on the porch steps and waited. The funeral guests who had been arriving began to turn away, their cars disappearing around the corner one by one. The catering truck pulled out of the driveway without unloading. The florist retrieved the arrangements she had just delivered. No one stopped to ask the two little girls why they were sitting on the steps surrounded by garbage bags full of their belongings. No one stopped to ask if they needed help. No one stopped at all. Mrs. Patterson from next door appeared at her window. Maya met the older woman's eyes and silently begged her to do something, to say something, to be the kind person their father had always promised would come. Mrs. Patterson looked away and let the curtain fall. "Why doesn't anyone help us?" Zoe whispered. Maya watched another car drive past without slowing down. "I don't know. Is it because we're black?" The question hung in the air, between them, heavy and poisonous. Maya thought about all the times they had been followed in stores. All the times teachers had assumed they couldn't read as well as the white kids. All the times neighbors had crossed the street to avoid walking past them. "Maybe," she said finally. "I don't know, maybe." A man walking his dog approached the house. He was white middle-aged, wearing a golf shirt and khaki pants. He paused at the edge of the property, looking at the two girls and their pile of belongings. "Excuse me," Maya called out, her voice desperate. "Excuse me, sir. Can you help us? Our stepmother put us out, and we don't have anywhere to go." The man's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, discomfort, something that might have been pity, and then finally nothing at all. "Sorry, kids, Pony," he said, tugging on his dog's leash. "Not my business." He walked away without looking back. Zoe buried her face in her hands. Nobody cares. Nobody in the whole world cares what happens to us. Maya put her arm around her sister and pulled her close. Daddy cared. Mama cared. And somewhere out there there's a kind person who's going to help us. We just have to wait. How do you know? Maya reached into the bag and pulled out their mother's Bible. The leather was worn soft from years of handling the gold letters on the cover, faded, but still legible. She opened it to the inside front cover, where their father had written a message in his careful, precise handwriting. To my beautiful daughters. When you are afraid, put your hand on this book and wait. God always sends a kind soul to those who need one. Love, Daddy. Because Daddy said so, Maya whispered, and Daddy never lied to us, not once. The sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The temperature dropped as evening approached, and Maya felt Zoe shivering against her side. I'm cold, Zoe said. I know, me too. And hungry. I know. They had been too upset to eat breakfast that morning, too numb during the funeral, to accept the food that mourners pressed into their hands. Now Maya's stomach cramped with emptiness, but there was nothing she could do about it. The front door opened. Victoria stepped onto the porch, a glass of wine in her hand. She looked down at the two girls with an expression of mild annoyance, like they were stray cats that had wandered onto her property. You're still here. Maya stood up, pulling Zoe with her. We don't have anywhere to go. Please. Just let us stay one more night. We'll sleep in the garage. We won't bother you at all. Just one night. Victoria took a long sip of her wine. No. But it's getting dark and cold, and Zoe is only 8 years old. She's just a little girl. Please, I'm begging you. Something flickered in Victoria's eyes. For just a moment, Maya thought she saw a crack in the woman's armor, a glimpse of something human underneath all that ice. Then it was gone. You have 5 seconds to get off my property before I call the police. Victoria pulled out her phone and held it up. 5, 4, 3. Maya grabbed the suitcase and the bags. Come on, Zoe, we have to go. 2. They stumbled down the steps, dragging their belongings behind them. 1. Maya looked back one last time. Victoria was standing in the doorway of the house where Maya had been born, where she had taken her first steps, where her father had read her bedtime stories every night until she was old enough to read them herself. Victoria smiled and raised her wine glass in a mock toast. Good luck, girls. You're going to need it. The door closed. The lock clicked. And just like that, Maya and Zoe Williams were homeless. They made it to the end of the block before Zoe's legs gave out. She sat down on the curb and began to cry, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Maya sat down beside her, put her arms around her sister, and let her own tears fall. They sat like that for a long time, two small figures huddled together in the gathering darkness. Cars drove past without stopping. People walked by without looking. The world continued to turn completely indifferent to the two little girls whose lives had just fallen apart. Maya? Zoe finally lifted her head, her face streaked with tears. What are we going to do? Maya looked down at the Bible in her lap. She thought about her father's message about the kind soul who was supposed to come about all the promises that now seemed like nothing more than beautiful lies. We're going to walk to the church, she said. Pastor Williams will help us. He was friends with Daddy. He'll know what to do. That's so far away. I know, but we don't have any other choice. They gathered their things and started walking. The suitcase was heavy, its broken wheels scraping against the sidewalk with every step. The plastic bags dug into Maya's fingers, leaving red marks that burned. But she didn't complain. She didn't stop. She just kept putting one foot in front of the other, pulling her sister along behind her. They had gone maybe 3 blocks when the rain started. At first, it was just a light drizzle, more mist than water. But within minutes, it had turned into a steady downpour that soaked through their thin funeral dresses and plastered their hair to their faces. I can't carry this anymore, Zoe said, dropping one of the bags. Clothes spilled out onto the wet sidewalk. Maya stopped and looked at the trail of belongings they were leaving behind. Her arms ached, her feet hurt, her heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand. Leave it, she said. Just carry the doll and hold on to me. We'll come back for the rest later. But they both knew they wouldn't be coming back. These things were gone now, lost to the rain and the night, and the cruelty of a world that didn't care about 2 little black girls with no place to go. They were halfway to the church when the headlights appeared. Maya's first instinct was fear. She had heard the stories about cars that slowed down for children walking alone at night, about the bad people who drove them, about what happened to the children who got in. She pulled Zoe to the side of the road and pressed them both against a hedge, trying to make themselves invisible. The car was a black Mercedes, expensive and sleek, the kind that didn't belong in this neighborhood. It slowed as it passed them, and Maya's heart hammered in her chest. Then it stopped. Maya grabbed Zoe's hand. "If I say run, you run as fast as you can and don't look back. Promise me." "I promise," Zoe whispered, her voice trembling. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out. He was black, maybe 60 years old, with gray at his temples and deep lines around his eye. He wore a dark suit that was getting soaked in the rain, but he didn't seem to notice or care. For a long moment, he just stood there looking at them. His eyes moved from their soaked dresses to their bare arms to the battered suitcase Maya was still dragging behind her. Then he spoke. "Maya Williams, Zoe Williams." It wasn't a question. He knew their names. Maya's grip on her sister's hand tightened. "Who are you, How do you know who we are?" The man took a step closer, then stopped, as if he understood that sudden movements might frighten them. "My name is Elijah Carter. I was at your father's funeral today. I sat in the back row because I didn't want to cause any trouble." Maya's mind raced. The name sounded familiar. Her father had mentioned it a few times, always in a tone of voice that suggested complicated feelings. "Why were you following us?" she demanded. "I wasn't following you. I was following Victoria." Elijah's voice hardened when he said her name. "I saw what she did to you on that porch. I saw her slap your sister. I saw her throw your belongings into the yard like garbage. I saw her lock the door and leave you standing there with nowhere to go. Then why didn't you help us?" The words burst out of Maya before she could stop them, fueled by hours of fear and pain and desperate lonely waiting. "You saw everything and you just sat there and watched. What kind of person does that?" Elijah flinched as if she had struck him. "You're right. I should have done something sooner. I was trying to figure out the best way to approach the situation. I was worried that if I confronted Victoria directly, she might take it out on you later. But then you started walking and the rain started falling and I realized I had already waited too long." He took another step closer, close enough now that Maya could see the rain dripping down his face like tears. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry. I failed you and your sister today, and I will never forgive myself for that. But if you give me a chance, I want to make it right." Maya studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. She saw only grief and guilt and something else that looked like recognition. "How did you know our father?" she asked. "We were partners once, back before you were born. I helped him start his construction business when no bank in this city would give a black man a loan. We worked side by side for almost 10 years. Elijah paused, his voice catching. "He was like a brother to me." "Then why did you stop coming around? If you were so close, how come we never saw you?" Pain flickered across Elijah's face. "Victoria, when your father married her, she made it clear that I wasn't welcome anymore. She convinced him that I was trying to interfere in his family, that I was jealous of his success. Your father and I had a falling out. We hadn't spoken in over 3 years." Zoe spoke up for the first time, her voice small but curious. "Were you jealous?" Elijah shook his head. "No, sweetheart. I was worried. I could see what Victoria really was from the moment I met her. I tried to warn your father, but he was in love. He couldn't see the truth, and eventually he stopped wanting to hear it." Maya felt something shift in her chest. This man's story matched everything she knew about her father, about Victoria, about the way their family had slowly isolated itself from everyone who might have helped them. "You knew," she said slowly. "You knew what Victoria was going to do." "I suspected. That's why I came to the funeral. I wanted to see for myself if your father had made provisions for you in his will. I wanted to make sure you were protected." Maya's heart skipped. "His will? Do you know what's in it?" Elijah hesitated. "I know what was in the will he showed me 5 years ago. Whether that's still the current version, I can't say. But if it is, then Victoria has no claim to anything. That house, your father's business, his savings, everything was supposed to go to you and your sister." Zoe gasped. "You mean Victoria lied? The house is really ours." "If the will hasn't been changed, yes. But Victoria has always been clever. She may have found a way to destroy it or replace it with something else." "Niño." Elijah looked at Maya with serious eyes. "That's why we need to be very careful about how we proceed. If Victoria finds out that we're looking into the will, she'll do everything in her power to stop us." Maya thought about the way Victoria had smiled as she threw their belongings onto the porch. The way she had called them names that burned like acid. The way she had slapped Zoe without a moment's hesitation. This was not a woman who would give up easily. This was a woman who had spent 5 years waiting for the right moment to strike. A woman who had planned every detail of this day with cold, ruthless precision. Why should we trust you? Maya asked. You say you were our father's friend, but we only have your word for that. How do we know you're not working with Victoria? Elijah reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. Inside was a photograph, worn and creased from years of handling. He held it out to Maya. She took it carefully, tilting it toward the streetlight so she could see. The photo showed two men standing in front of a construction site, both of them grinning widely. One was clearly Elijah younger, and without the gray in his hair. The other was her father. In her father's arms were two babies, identical twins with tiny fingers and sleeping faces. That was taken the day you came home from the hospital, Elijah said quietly. Your father asked me to be your godfather. I said yes. I promised him that day that I would always look out for you no matter what happened, and I intend to keep that promise. Maya stared at the photograph for a long moment. Then she looked up at Elijah, really looked at him for the first time. She saw the pain in his eyes, the regret, the desperate hope that she would believe him, and somehow in a way she couldn't explain, she knew he was telling the truth. Okay, she said, we'll come with you. Elijah's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you for trusting me. He helped them into the back seat of the Mercedes, making sure their seatbelts were fastened before closing the door. He put the wet suitcase and bags in the trunk, then got behind the wheel. Where are we going? Maya asked. My house. It's about 20 minutes outside the city. You'll be safe there and dry and fed. Tomorrow morning we'll start figuring out what to do about Victoria and the will. The car pulled away from the curb. Maya watched the rain-streaked streets slide past the familiar landmarks of her neighborhood, giving way to unfamiliar roads and eventually to darkness broken only by the occasional streetlight. Zoe fell asleep against her shoulder, exhausted by the trauma of the day. But Maya couldn't close her eye. Her mind kept turning over everything that had happened, everything she had learned, everything that still didn't make sense. Mr. Carter, she said quietly, not wanting to wake her sister. You can call me Grandpa Eli, he said. That's what your father wanted you to call me before Victoria came along. Grandpa Eli. The name felt strange on her tongue, but not unpleasant. Can I ask you something? Anything. The will you mentioned, the one that says everything belongs to me and Zoe. Do you know where it is? Elijah was quiet for a moment. No, your father never told me where he kept the original, but I have a copy that he gave me years ago. It won't hold up in court on its own, but it might help us figure out where to look. Maya thought about this. She thought about her father, always so careful, always so protective. He would have hidden the original somewhere safe, somewhere Victoria would never think to look, somewhere that meant something to him. Her hand drifted to the bag at her feet where the Bible was wrapped in her Sunday dress. When you are afraid, put your hand on this book and wait. God always sends a kind soul to those who need one. Her father had written those words. He had told them to keep the Bible safe, to never let anyone take it away. He had made them promise. What if he hadn't just been talking about faith? What if he had been trying to tell them something else? Maya's fingers closed around the Bible's worn leather cover. She felt its familiar weight, its familiar texture. But as she held it, she noticed something she had never noticed before. The stitching along the spine was slightly different from the rest, a slightly different color thread, as if someone had opened it up and sewed it back together. Her heart began to pound. Grandpa Eli. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Yes. I think I know where the will might be. Elijah glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his eyes sharp with sudden interest. Where? Maya hesitated. Part of her wanted to tell him everything, to open the Bible right now and see if she was right. But another part of her, the part that had learned today just how quickly people could betray you, held back. I'm not sure yet, she said carefully. I need to think about it some more. Elijah nodded slowly. That's wise. Don't tell anyone anything until you're absolutely certain you can trust them. Not even me. Maya blinked in surprise. You're not upset. Upset? Elijah let out a soft laugh. Child, I'm proud of you. Your father raised you right. He taught you to be careful, to think before you act, to protect yourself and your sister above all else. Those are the qualities that are going to get you through this. He turned the car onto a long driveway lined with oak trees, their branches heavy with Spanish moss that swayed in the wind. We're here, he said. Welcome to your new home, for as long as you need it. The house that appeared before them was large but not imposing, with warm light spilling from the windows and a wraparound porch that looked perfect for summer evenings. It was the kind of house Maya had always dreamed of living, in the kind where families gathered for holidays and children played in the yard. But as beautiful as it wasn't her home. Her home was 20 minutes away, locked behind a door that would never open for her again, unless she could prove that Victoria had been lying all along. Maya clutched the Bible tighter against her chest. Tomorrow she would look inside. Tomorrow she would find out if her father had truly planned for this moment, if he had left them one final gift, one last act of protection from beyond the grave. But for tonight, she would rest, she would eat, she would hold her sister close and try to forget the sound of Victoria's laughter, the sting of the slap that had started it all. The rain had stopped, she realized, and through a break in the clouds she could see a handful of stars beginning to appear. Her father used to tell her that stars were the souls of people who had passed on, watching over the ones they loved. "I hear you, Daddy," she whispered, too soft for anyone else to hear. "I know what you want me to do, and I'm going to make you proud. I promise." Zoe stirred beside her, her eyes fluttering open. "Maya, are we there?" "Yeah, baby, we're there." Zoe looked out the window at the big house with the warm lights. "Is this heaven?" Maya almost smiled. "No, but I think it might be close." Elijah opened the door and held out his hand to help them out. "Come inside, girls. You're safe now. Whatever happens next, I want you to remember that. You are safe, you are loved, and you are not alone anymore." Maya took his hand and stepped out of the car. The cool night air filled her lungs, clean and fresh after the rain. She looked up at the stars one more time, at the souls watching over her, at the father who had somehow known that this day would come. "We're ready," she said. "Whatever happens next, we're ready." And holding her sister's hand, she walked toward the light. The front door closed behind them, and Maya felt the warmth of the house wrap around her like a blanket. Zoe pressed against her side, still half asleep, still trembling from the cold and the fear and everything else that had happened in the last 12 hours. Elijah moved quickly, his hands gentle but efficient, as he guided them toward a large sofa. He pulled blankets from a nearby closet and draped them over the girls' shoulders. "Stay here," he said. "I'm going to make some soup. You need to eat." Maya nodded, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. Her fingers kept drifting back to the Bible, tracing the strange stitching along the spine. She wanted to open it now, right now, but something held her back. Zoe was watching. Elijah was watching, and she still wasn't entirely sure she could trust anyone. "Maya," Zoe's voice was small, and tall and tired. "Is this man really our godfather?" "I think so." "Then why didn't Daddy ever tell us about him?" Maya didn't have an answer. Their father had kept so many secrets. The happy marriage that wasn't really happy, the wife who wasn't really kind, the plans he must have made for exactly this moment. "I don't know," she admitted, "but we're going to find out." Elijah returned 10 minutes later with 2 steaming bowls of tomato soup and a plate of buttered toast. He set them on the coffee table and sat down in the armchair across from the girls. "Eat first," he said. "Questions after." Maya picked up the spoon, but her hand was shaking so badly that half the soup splashed back into the bowl. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until the smell hit her nose. She hadn't eaten since yesterday. Since before her father's heart stopped. Since before the world ended. Zoe ate faster than Maya had ever seen her eat anything. Within minutes, her bowl was empty, and she was eyeing the toast with desperate hunger. "There's more in the kitchen," Elijah said gently. "Eat as much as you want. Tonight, this house is yours." Zoe looked at Maya for permission. Maya nodded, and her sister scrambled off the couch and disappeared through the doorway. The moment she was gone, Elijah leaned forward. "You said you might know where the will is. Tell me what you're thinking." Maya hesitated. "How do I know I can trust you?" "You don't." Elijah's answer was blunt and honest. "But you're going to have to trust someone eventually, and right now I'm the only person in the world who's trying to help you." Maya studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. She found only patience and something that looked like grief. "The Bible," she said finally. "Daddy always told us to keep it safe. He made us promise never to let anyone take it. And tonight when I was holding it, I noticed something. The stitching on the spine is different, like someone opened it up and sewed it back together." Elijah's eyes widened. "You think he hid the will inside the Bible?" "I don't know, but it's the only place I can think of that Victoria would never look. She hated that Bible. She said it was old and dirty, and she wanted to throw it away, but Daddy wouldn't let her." Elijah stood up abruptly. "Where is it, the Bible? Where is it now?" "In my bag by the door." He was across the room before Maya could say another word. He grabbed the bag and brought it back to the coffee table, setting it down with trembling hands. "May I?" he asked. Maya nodded. Elijah reached into the bag and pulled out the Bible. He held it carefully, reverently, turning it over in his hands. His fingers found the strange stitching along the spine, the same stitching Maya had noticed. "You're right," he breathed. "This isn't original. Someone added this later. Can you open it?" Elijah looked at her. "Are you sure once we do this, there's no going back? If the will is inside, Victoria will know we have it. She'll come after you with everything she has." Maya thought about the slap that had knocked her sister to the ground, the words that had cut deeper than any blade, the smile on Victoria's face as she watched them walk away into the rain. "Open it." Elijah pulled a small pocket knife from his jacket and carefully cut the stitches along the spine. The leather parted slowly, revealing a hidden pocket that had been sewn into the binding. Inside was a white envelope sealed with tape. Maya's heart stopped. "It's here," she whispered. "It's really here." Elijah opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were several sheets of paper folded 3 times. He unfolded them slowly, his eyes scanning the text. For a long moment, he didn't speak. His face went through a series of emotions that Maya couldn't read. Shock, anger, grief, and finally something that looked like triumph. "Maya," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "do you know what this is? The will? Not just any will." He looked up at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "This is your father's original last will and testament, dated 6 months ago, witnessed by 2 people I know personally, and completely legally valid." Maya's breath caught in her throat. "What does it say?" Elijah read aloud, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "I, Marcus Williams, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. I revoke all previous wills and codicils. All of my property, including my home, my business, and all financial assets, I leave to my beloved daughters, Maya Rose Williams and Zoe Grace Williams, in equal shares." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Furthermore, I appoint Elijah James Carter as the legal guardian of my minor children in the event of my death. My wife, Victoria Ellis Williams, is to receive a monthly allowance of $2,000 for a period of 5 years, after which all financial support will cease. Under no circumstances is Victoria to have custody of or access to my children." Maya felt the tears streaming down her face, but she made no move to wipe them away. Daddy knew what Victoria was going to do. He suspected. Elijah set down the will and looked at her with fierce determination. "Your father came to me 6 months ago. He said he had made a terrible mistake marrying Victoria, but he didn't know how to get out of it. He was afraid of what she might do if he asked for a divorce, so he made this will instead. He hid it where she would never find it, and he trusted that one day you would be smart enough to figure it out." Zoe appeared in the doorway, another bowl of soup in her hands. "Figure what out? What's going on?" Maya held out her arms, and her sister ran to her. She pulled Zoe close and buried her face in her sister's hair. "We're going to be okay?" she whispered. "Daddy made sure of it. He left us everything, the house, the money, everything, and Victoria gets nothing." Zoe pulled back, her eyes wide. "Nothing. Nothing. And Grandpa Eli is supposed to be our guardian. It says so right here in the will." Zoe looked at Elijah with new understanding. "So you're really our family." Elijah knelt down until he was at eye level with both girls. "I've always been your family. I just got lost for a while, but I'm back now, and I'm not going anywhere ever again." He pulled them both into a hug, and for the first time since her father's death, Maya felt something loosen in her chest. The knot of fear and grief that had been choking her began to ease just a little, but the moment didn't last. Elijah's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and looked at the screen, his face hardening. "What is it?" Maya asked. "A text from my lawyer. He says Victoria has already filed paperwork with the county. She's claiming to be the sole beneficiary of your father's estate." Maya's blood ran cold. "Can she do that?" "She can try, but she doesn't have this." Elijah held up the will. "This changes everything. First thing tomorrow morning, we're going to the courthouse to file this document, and then we're going to watch Victoria's entire house of cards come crashing down." Maya should have felt relieved. She should have felt victorious. But instead, she felt a cold chill creeping down her spine. Victoria was not going to give up without a fight, and Maya had a terrible feeling that the fight was just beginning. The clock on the wall read 11:30 when Elijah finally insisted that the girls go to bed. He showed them to a guest room with 2 twin beds and fresh sheets that smelled like lavender. "Try to sleep," he said. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Maya nodded, but she knew sleep would be impossible. Her mind was racing too fast, spinning through everything that had happened, and everything that was still to come. She waited until she heard Elijah's footsteps retreat down the hallway. Then she sat up in bed and looked at her sister. "Zoe, are you awake?" "I can't sleep," Zoe whispered. "Every time I close my eyes, I see her face. I see her hitting me." Maya crossed the room and climbed into bed beside her sister. She wrapped her arms around Zoe and held her tight. "I won't let her hurt you again," she promised. "Never again." "How do you know she's grown up? She has money and lawyers and people who believe her lies. We're just kids. No one ever believes kids." Maya thought about the will hidden downstairs. The document that proved their father had known, had planned, had protected them even from beyond the grave. "Daddy believed us," she said. "Daddy knew what Victoria was, and he made sure we would be safe. We just have to trust him. But Daddy's gone." "No," Maya tightened her grip on her sister. "Daddy's not gone. He's watching over us right now, making sure everything works out. Remember what he always said? Kind people always come when you need them most. And they did, Zoe. Grandpa Eli came, just like Daddy promised." Zoe was quiet for a long moment. Then she snuggled closer to her sister and closed her eyes. "Maya, I love you." "I love you too, baby. Now try to sleep. Tomorrow we're going to take back everything Victoria stole from us." But even as Maya said the words, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something was coming. Something dark and dangerous that she couldn't see yet. She lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to her sister's breathing slow into the rhythm of sleep. Outside, the rain had started again, pattering against the windows like fingers tapping for entry. At 2:15 in the morning, Maya finally drifted off. At 4:47, she woke to the sound of breaking glass. Maya sat bolt upright, her heart pounding. Beside her, Zoe stirred but didn't wake. "Grandpa Eli?" Maya called out, her voice barely above a whisper. No answer. She slipped out of bed and crept toward the door, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. The hallway was dark, but she could see a faint light coming from somewhere downstairs. And then she heard voices. "Where are the papers?" A man's voice, rough and threatening. "I don't know what you're talking about." Elijah's voice strained but defiant. "Don't lie to me, old man. Victoria told us you have the will. Hand it over, and this can all be very simple." Maya's blood turned to ice. Victoria had sent someone. Already, in the middle of the night. She pressed herself against the wall, her mind racing. She had to do something. She had to help. But what could an 8-year-old girl do against grown men? She looked back at the bedroom door, at Zoe still sleeping peacefully, and she made a decision. Maya crept down the stairs as quietly as she could, staying in the shadows. Through the doorway to the living room, she could see Elijah standing with his hands raised. 2 men stood in front of him. One was holding what looked like a baseball bat. The other had Elijah's phone in his hand. "Last chance," the man with the bat said. "Where's the will?" "Even if I told you, it wouldn't matter." Elijah's voice was steady, almost calm. "I've already made copies. I've already contacted my lawyer. Destroying the original won't change anything." The man with the bat stepped closer. "Maybe not, but it'll make Victoria feel better, and hurting you will make me feel better." He raised the bat. Maya didn't think. She just acted. "Stop!" she screamed, running into the room. "Stop! Leave him alone!" Both men spun toward her. The one with the bat actually looked surprised. "Well, well," he said slowly. "One of the little orphans decided to join the party." "Maya, run!" Elijah shouted. "Get your sister and run!" But Maya didn't run. She stood her ground, her small body trembling but her voice fierce. "Victoria sent you, didn't she? She sent you to steal from us, to hurt us, just like she's been hurting us for years." The man with the bat laughed. "Hurting you, sweetheart. You haven't seen hurt yet." "I've seen enough." Maya's voice cracked, but she kept talking. "I've seen her hit my sister. I've seen her throw us out of our own house. I've seen her steal everything my father worked for, and I'm not going to let her get away with it." She reached into her pocket and pulled out her father's phone, the phone she had grabbed from the bag by the door before sneaking downstairs. "I've been recording everything," she said. "Every word you've said, every threat you've made, and in about 30 seconds this video is going to be sent to every news station in the state." It was a bluff, a desperate, terrified bluff. The phone wasn't recording anything, but the men didn't know that. The one with the bat froze. He looked at his partner, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "She's lying, the other man said. "She's just a kid." "Are you sure about that?" Maya held up the phone, her hand steady despite her racing heart. "Are you willing to bet your freedom on it?" For a long moment, no one moved. Then the man with the bat lowered his weapon and took a step back. "This isn't over," he said. "Victoria has powerful friends. You think a will is going to protect you? You think hiding out here with this old man is going to keep you safe? You're wrong. Dead wrong. He turned and walked toward the broken window they had climbed through. His partner followed, but not before shooting one last look at Maya. Brave kid, he muttered. Stupid, but brave. And then they were gone. The moment they disappeared into the darkness, Maya's legs gave out. She collapsed onto the floor, the phone clattering from her shaking hands. Elijah was at her side in an instant. Maya, are you okay? She couldn't answer. She couldn't breathe. All the fear she had been holding back came flooding out in great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. It's okay, Elijah said, gathering her into his arms. It's okay. You were so brave, so incredibly brave. Your father would have been so proud of you. They're going to come back, Maya gasped between sobs. Victoria's going to send more people. She's never going to stop. Then we'll stop her first. Elijah's voice was hard with determination. Tomorrow morning we're going to the police. We're going to the courthouse. We're going to every newspaper and television station in this city. By the time we're done, the whole world is going to know what Victoria Ellis has done. What? Maya looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. Promise. I promise. Elijah wiped her tears with his thumb. Your father trusted me to protect you, and I'm not going to let him down. Not now, not ever. Footsteps sounded on the stairs. They both turned to see Zoe standing in the doorway, her doll clutched against her chest, her eyes wide with fear. What happened? She whispered. Maya, why are you crying? Why is there glass on the floor? Maya stood up on shaky legs and crossed the room to her sister. She pulled Zoe into a hug so tight that neither of them could breathe. Bad people came, she said, but they're gone now, and they're never going to hurt us again. Zoe pulled back and looked into her sister's eyes. You scared them away. Yeah. Maya almost laughed. I guess I did. For the first time since all of this began, Zoe smiled. It was small and uncertain, but it was real. You're like a superhero, she said. Like Black Panther or something. Demi! Maya hugged her sister again, hiding the tears that threatened to spill over. I'm not a superhero. I'm just your big sister, and that's enough. The sun rose at 6:22 the next morning. None of them had slept. Elijah had boarded up the broken window and spent the rest of the night making phone calls. To his lawyer, to the police, to people whose names Maya didn't recognize, but whose voices on the speakerphone sounded serious and official. By the time the first light began to creep through the curtains, a plan had been formed. We leave in 1 hour, Elijah said. First stop is the police station to file a report about the break-in. Then we go to the courthouse to submit the will. After that, we meet with my lawyer to discuss next steps. Maya nodded. Her eyes were burning from lack of sleep, but her mind was clear, clearer than it had been in days. What about Victoria? She asked. What happens to her? That depends on the police. But between the will, the evidence of financial fraud, and now this attempted break-in, I'd say she's in serious trouble. Zoe looked up from the toast she had been picking at. Will she go to jail? Maybe. Elijah's voice was gentle but honest. But even if she doesn't, she'll never be able to hurt you again. The will makes me your legal guardian. She has no claim on you, no right to see you, and no access to any of your father's money. Whatever happens, you two are safe. Maya wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that this nightmare was almost over, that justice would prevail, that everything would work out the way it was supposed to. But she had seen Victoria's eyes when she threw them out of the house. She had heard the hatred in her voice when she called them names. She had felt the force of the slap that had knocked her sister to the ground. Victoria was not going to give up. Victoria was not going to admit defeat. Victoria was going to fight with everything she had, and Maya knew deep in her bones that the real battle hadn't even started yet. The police station was chaos. Officers moved back and forth across the lobby, phones rang constantly, and somewhere in the back someone was shouting about a stolen car. Maya and Zoe huddled close to Elijah, feeling very small and very lost in the middle of all the activity. A heavy-set woman in uniform approached them. Can I help you? I need to file a report, Elijah said. My house was broken into last night. 2 men threatened me and my granddaughters. The woman's eyes flickered to Maya and Zoe. Something in her expression softened. Come with me. She led them to a small office in the back and closed the door. The sudden quiet was a relief after the noise of the lobby. Tell me everything, she said, pulling out a notepad. Elijah talked for nearly 20 minutes. He described the break-in, the threats, the connection to Victoria. He showed her pictures of the broken window on his phone. He gave her the names of the 2 men which his security cameras had helped identify. The officer listened without interrupting. When Elijah finished, she set down her pen and looked at the two girls. "Is all of this true?" Maya nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "And you're the ones who were thrown out of your home yesterday after your father's funeral?" "Yes, ma'am." The officer was quiet for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone and made a call. "I need a detective in interview room 3, priority case, suspected child abuse fraud and conspiracy to commit assault." She hung up and looked at Elijah. "This is going to take a while, but I promise you we're going to take this seriously. What that woman did to these children is unconscionable." Maya felt something warm bloom in her chest. For the first time since Victoria had thrown them out, someone in authority was actually listening, actually believing them, actually taking their side. "Thank you," she whispered. The officer smiled sadly. "Don't thank me yet, sweetheart. The legal system moves slow, but it does move. And when it catches up to Victoria Ellis, she's going to wish she had never messed with your family." It was nearly noon by the time they left the police station. Maya's head was pounding and her stomach was growling, but she barely noticed. Everything felt surreal, like she was watching her own life from a great distance. "Courthouse next," Elijah said as they got into the car. "We need to file the will before Victoria can do any more damage." The drive took 15 minutes. Maya stared out the window, watching the city slide past. So much had happened in the last 24 hours. Her father's funeral, Victoria's cruelty, the rain and the walking and the fear, finding Grandpa Eli, discovering the will, the break-in, the police. It felt like a lifetime. It felt like forever. The courthouse was a massive stone building with columns out front and wide steps leading up to the entrance. Elijah led them through security and up to the 3rd floor, where a clerk sat behind a thick glass window. "I need to file a last will and testament," Elijah said. "It's urgent." The clerk looked bored. "Fill out this form. Processing takes 3 to 5 business days." 3 to 5 days? Maya's voice came out louder than she intended. "But Victoria is already trying to steal everything. We don't have 3 to 5 days. The clerk's expression didn't change. "That's the standard processing time. If you want expedited service, you'll need to speak with a judge." Elijah put his hand on Maya's shoulder. "Is there a judge available today?" "Judge Harrison has an opening in about 2 hours, but you'll need to make an appointment with her clerk." 2 hours. Maya felt the weight of every passing minute. Every second, Victoria had to plan to scheme to destroy whatever evidence she might still be hiding. "We'll take it," Elijah said. "Make the appointment." They waited in the courthouse lobby, sitting on hard wooden benches that had probably been there for 100 years. Zoe fell asleep against Maya's shoulder, exhausted despite the coffee Elijah had bought her. Maya couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Victoria, about what she might be doing right now. Was she at the house, destroying documents? Was she moving money? Was she planning another attack? "Grandpa Eli," Maya said quietly. "Yes? What if it doesn't work? What if the judge doesn't believe us? What if Victoria finds a way to win?" Elijah turned to look at her, his eyes serious. "Then we'll appeal. We'll fight. We'll keep going until we get justice." "But what if we can't? What if she's too powerful?" Elijah was quiet for a moment. Then he reached over and took Maya's hand. "Your father was one of the bravest men I ever knew. He built his business from nothing. He raised 2 beautiful daughters on his own after your mother died. He stood up against people who tried to tear him down, and he never backed away from a fight." He squeezed her hand. "You have his blood in your veins, Maya. You have his courage in your heart, and I've already seen it. The way you stood up to those men last night, the way you protected your sister, the way you're sitting here right now ready to face whatever comes next." His voice grew fierce. "Victoria may have money and lawyers and powerful friends, but she doesn't have what we have. She doesn't have the truth. She doesn't have justice on her side, and she doesn't have you." Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. "You really think we can win?" "I know we can, because your father believed in you, and so do I." At 2:17 in the afternoon, they were called into Judge Harrison's chambers. The judge was a black woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. She sat behind a massive desk covered in papers, and she didn't smile as they entered. "Sit down," she said, "and tell me why you need an expedited hearing." Elijah explained everything: the death of Marcus Williams, Victoria's cruelty, the discovery of the will, the break-in last night, the police report filed this morning. Judge Harrison listened without interrupting. Her face remained expressionless throughout, giving nothing away. When Elijah finished, she turned to Maya. "Is everything this man said true?" Maya sat up straighter. "Yes, ma'am. All of it." Tell me about Victoria Ellis in your own words." Maya took a deep breath. "She was always mean to us, even when Daddy was alive. She would lock us in our room for hours when he wasn't home. Sometimes she wouldn't let us eat dinner. She told us we were worthless and dirty and that nobody would ever love us." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "Daddy didn't know. We never told him because we were scared of what Victoria would do, but after he died, she didn't have to pretend anymore. She threw us out like garbage. She hit my sister. She called us names that I can't even repeat." Judge Harrison's eyes flickered to Zoe. "Is this true, child?" Zoe nodded her hand instinctively, touching her cheek where the bruise was still visible. "Yes, ma'am. She hit me because I said Daddy's name." The judge was silent for a long moment. Then she picked up the will and studied it carefully, turning each page, examining the signatures, checking the dates. "This document appears to be authentic," she said finally. "I'll need to have it verified by our legal team, but based on what I'm seeing, this is a valid last will and testament." She looked at Elijah. "I'm going to issue an emergency order freezing all of Marcus Williams' assets until this matter can be fully adjudicated. Victoria Ellis will not be able to access any funds, sell any property, or make any decisions regarding the estate." Maya's heart leaped. "Really? Furthermore," Judge Harrison continued, "I'm granting you temporary custody of these children, Mr. Carter, as specified in the will. Victoria Ellis will have no contact with them until a full hearing can be held." Zoe grabbed Maya's hand. "Does that mean we can stay with Grandpa Eli?" "Yes, sweetheart." The judge's face finally softened. "That's exactly what it means." Maya felt the tears spilling down her cheeks, but for the first time in days, they weren't tears of pain or fear. They were tears of relief, of hope, of something that felt almost like joy. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." Judge Harrison nodded. "Don't thank me yet. Victoria Ellis is going to fight this with everything she has. The road ahead is going to be long and difficult, but you have the law on your side now, and you have each other." She stood up, signaling that the meeting was over. "One more thing." Her voice dropped, becoming almost gentle. "I knew your father, Maya. He did some work for the city a few years back. He was a good man, an honest man, and I'm very sorry for your loss." Maya nodded, unable to speak. "He would be proud of you," Judge Harrison said. "Both of you. Remember that." They walked out of the courthouse into the late afternoon sun. Maya tilted her face up toward the warmth, feeling it sink into her bones. For a moment, just one moment, everything felt okay. Then Elijah's phone rang. He looked at the screen and his face went pale. "What is it?" Maya asked. "It's my lawyer." Elijah answered the call. "Charles, what's happening?" Maya couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but she could see Elijah's expression changing. Confusion, disbelief, and then something that looked like fury. "That's impossible," he said. "The judge just froze everything. Victoria can't—" He stopped, listened. His jaw tightened. "I understand. We'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up and looked at Maya with eyes that had gone hard as stone. "What happened?" she asked. "What's wrong?" Elijah took a deep breath. "Victoria went to the house this morning, before the freeze order was issued. She cleaned out your father's safe. She took everything, all his cash, all his important documents." Maya felt the blood drain from her face. "What documents?" "Insurance policies, stock certificates. And according to my lawyer, she also took another will, a newer will that supposedly supersedes the one we found." The world tilted beneath Maya's feet. "Another will? That's not possible. Daddy wouldn't—" "I know." Elijah's voice was grim. "But Victoria is claiming she has a document dated 2 months ago that leaves everything to her. And if she can convince a court that it's authentic, then the will we found won't matter." Zoe gripped Maya's hand. "But it's fake. It has to be fake. Daddy would never leave everything to Victoria." "Of course it's fake," Elijah said. "But proving that is going to take time. Time that Victoria is going to use to make our lives as difficult as possible." Maya thought about the woman who had thrown them out into the rain, the woman who had hit her sister, the woman who had spent 5 years plotting and scheming for this exact moment. Victoria had been planning this for a long time. She had known exactly what she was going to do, and she had prepared for every possibility except one. She hadn't counted on the will hidden in the Bible, she hadn't counted on Grandpa Eli, and she hadn't counted on Maya. "What do we do now?" Maya asked. Elijah looked at her, and something passed between them. A understanding, a recognition. This 8-year-old girl had already faced down armed intruders in the middle of the night. She had already shown more courage than most adults would in a lifetime, and she wasn't done yet. Now, Elijah said, "We fight." The drive to Elijah's lawyer's office took 17 minutes. Maya counted every second, her mind racing through possibilities and fears. Victoria had a fake will. Victoria had stolen everything from the safe. Victoria was one step ahead of them, and every moment they wasted was another moment she had to destroy the truth. Charles Mitchell's office was on the 4th floor of a brick building downtown. He met them at the elevator, a tall black man in his 50s with gray at his temples and worry lines carved deep into his face. "We have a problem," he said before anyone could speak. "We know." Elijah's voice was tight. "The fake will." "It's worse than that." Charles led them into a conference room and closed the door. "Victoria's lawyer just filed an emergency motion claiming that the will you found was forged. They're saying you planted it in the Bible yourself to steal the estate from the rightful heir." Maya felt the floor drop out from under her. "That's a lie." "Of course it's a lie." Charles sat down heavily. "But Victoria has hired William Barnes to represent her. He's one of the most powerful attorneys in the state. He's already gotten a judge to schedule an emergency hearing for tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow?" Elijah slammed his hand on the table. "That's not enough time to prepare anything." "That's exactly the point. Barnes knows we have the real will. He knows Victoria's document is fake, so he's trying to rush this through before we can prove it." Zoe pressed closer to Maya. "What happens if we lose?" Charles hesitated, and that hesitation told Maya everything she needed to know. "If we lose," he said quietly, "Victoria gets everything. The house, the money, the business, and you two become wards of the state." "No." Maya's voice came out stronger than she expected. "That's not going to happen. There has to be something we can do." Charles pulled a folder from his briefcase. "There might be. The will Victoria is claiming to have was supposedly witnessed by 2 people, a man named Frank Dalton and a woman named Sarah Moore. If we can prove that either of those signatures is forged, the entire document falls apart." "How do we do that?" Elijah asked. "We find them, we get them to testify, and we hope they're willing to tell the truth." Maya grabbed the folder and looked at the names. Frank Dalton, Sarah Moore. She didn't recognize either one. "Do you know these people?" she asked Elijah. "Frank Dalton is the county sheriff. He's been friends with Victoria's family for years. Getting him to testify against her is going to be nearly impossible." "And Sarah Moore," Charles shook his head. "We're still trying to find her. The address on the document doesn't exist. The phone number is disconnected. It's like she vanished into thin air." Maya's mind was racing. Victoria was smart. Victoria was careful. She wouldn't have used real witnesses for a fake will. She would have made up names, forged signatures covered her tracks. But everyone made mistakes, even Victoria. "Grandpa Eli," Maya said slowly, "the men who broke into your house last night, did the police identify them?" "Yes, Jack Turner and Samuel Reed. They're both in custody." "And they work for Victoria?" "Apparently. Why?" Maya felt something click into place. If Victoria hired them to steal the real will, maybe she hired other people to help create the fake one, people who might be willing to talk if they're scared enough. Charles leaned forward. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we find out who Sarah Moore really is, because I don't think she's a real person. I think she's someone Victoria paid to pretend to be a witness." The room went silent. Elijah and Charles exchanged glances. "She's right," Elijah said finally. "Victoria doesn't trust anyone. She would have used someone she could control. Someone desperate enough to lie for money, but not important enough to cause problems if things went wrong." Charles pulled out his phone. "I have a private investigator on retainer. If Sarah Moore is a real person, he'll find her." "How long will that take?" Maya asked. "A few hours, maybe less." Maya looked at the clock on the wall. It was 4:37 in the afternoon. The hearing was tomorrow morning at 9. They had less than 17 hours to find a ghost and convince her to tell the truth. "Then we don't have time to waste," Maya said. "Let's go." They split up at 6:15. Elijah stayed with Charles to prepare legal documents. Maya and Zoe went with the private investigator, a sharp-eyed man named Marcus who drove a beat-up sedan and seemed to know every back alley in the city. "You kids should be home in bed," Marcus said as they pulled onto the highway. "This isn't work for children." "We're not children," Maya replied. "We're the ones Victoria tried to destroy, and we're going to be there when she goes down." Marcus looked at her in the rearview mirror. Something like respect flickered in his eyes. "Fair enough," he said. "But if things get dangerous, you do exactly what I say. No questions. No arguments. Deal. Deal." They drove for 45 minutes, heading into a part of the city Maya had never seen before. The buildings got older, more run down. The streetlights grew farther apart until they were driving through pools of darkness broken only by their headlights. "Where are we going?" Zoe whispered. "The address on the fake will doesn't exist," Marcus explained. "But the phone number that was listed belongs to a woman named Sandra Mitchell. She's got a record for fraud, identity theft, and forgery. If anyone in the city can create a fake witness, it's her." Maya's heart began to pound. "You think Victoria hired her?" "I think it's worth finding out." "Sure it." They stopped in front of a narrow building wedged between a laundromat and a pawn shop. Marcus killed the engine and turned to look at the girls. "Stay in the car, lock the doors, don't open them for anyone except me. Understand?" Maya wanted to argue, but something in Marcus's eyes stopped her. She nodded. "Good?" He got out, checked the gun at his hip, and disappeared into the building. The minutes crawled by. Maya counted each one, her eyes fixed on the entrance. Zoe had fallen asleep against her shoulder, exhausted by the day's events. At 7:22, the door opened. Marcus emerged, but he wasn't alone. A woman walked beside him, thin and jittery with bleached blonde hair and mascara smeared under her eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Maya unlocked the door as they approached. "Girls, meet Sandra Mitchell," Marcus said. "She has something very interesting to tell us." Sandra slid into the passenger seat, her eyes darting nervously. "I didn't know what Victoria was planning, I swear. She just paid me to sign some papers. She said it was nothing serious." "What papers?" Maya demanded. "The will, the fake will." Sandra's voice cracked. "She came to me 3 months ago. She said her husband was dying, and she needed help making sure she got what was rightfully hers. She paid me $5,000 to sign as a witness. She said no one would ever find out." Maya felt her blood boiling. "And you didn't think there was anything wrong with that?" "I needed the money." Sandra was crying now. "I've got a kid, I've got bills. Victoria said it was just a formality. She said the real will was lost and she was just recreating it." "She lied to you." Marcus's voice was flat. "Victoria's husband left everything to his daughters. She's been trying to steal their inheritance since before he was even dead." Sandra's face crumpled. Oh God, what did I do?" Maya leaned forward. "You can fix this. You can tell the truth. Tomorrow morning in court, you can tell the judge that Victoria paid you to forge a witness signature." "I can't," Sandra shook her head frantically. "Victoria knows people, dangerous people. If I testify against her, she'll destroy me. She'll take my kid. She'll do nothing." Maya's voice was sharp and steady. "Because tomorrow, Victoria is going to be arrested. She's going to lose everything. And the only question is whether you're going to be standing with us or standing with her when it happens." Sandra stared at her tears streaming down her face. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then slowly she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I'll testify. But you have to promise me. You have to promise that nothing will happen to my son." Maya reached out and took the woman's hand. "I promise. Whatever it takes will protect you, both of you." Sandra let out a shuddering breath. "Thank you. Thank you." Marcus was already on the phone with Charles. "We've got a witness. Get the paperwork ready. We're coming in." The clock on the dashboard read 7:48, less than 14 hours until the hearing. They were still in the game. By 9:30 that night, Sandra had given a full statement to Charles and signed an affidavit swearing that Victoria had paid her to forge a witness signature on a fake will. Marcus had found documentation of the $5,000 payment traced through 3 different bank accounts, but ultimately leading back to Victoria's personal funds. It was enough. It had to be enough. Maya sat in Elijah's living room, too exhausted to move, but too wired to sleep. Zoe was curled up on the couch, finally getting the rest she desperately needed. Elijah was in the kitchen making coffee and talking on the phone in low, urgent tones. The doorbell rang at 9:52. Maya's heart jumped. After last night's break-in, every unexpected sound felt like a threat. Elijah emerged from the kitchen, his phone still pressed to his ear. "I'll get it. Stay here." He walked to the door, checked the peephole, and his entire body went rigid. "Who is it?" Maya asked. Elijah didn't answer. He just stood there, frozen, his hand on the doorknob. "Grandpa Eli, who is it?" Slowly, Elijah opened the door. Victoria Ellis stood on the porch. She was alone? No lawyers, no thugs, no protection. Just a woman in an expensive dress, her face carefully composed into an expression of concern. "Hello, Elijah," she said. "I think it's time we talked." Maya was on her feet before she knew what she was doing. She crossed the room and stood beside Elijah, her fists clenched at her sides. "Get out," she said. "You're not welcome here." Victoria's eyes flickered to Maya and something cold passed through them, but her voice remained calm, almost pleasant. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to make a deal." "We don't make deals with liars and child abusers," Elijah said. "Leave now or I'll call the police." "The police?" Victoria laughed softly. "Elijah the sheriff is a personal friend of mine. Call whoever you want. I'll be out of here long before anyone arrives." She took a step closer and Maya saw something in her face that she hadn't seen before. Desperation. Behind the makeup and the confidence, Victoria was scared. "Look," Victoria said, lowering her voice. "I know you think you have everything figured out. You have the will, you have your little witness. You think you're going to walk into court tomorrow and destroy me." "That's exactly what we're going to," Maya said. Victoria's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. "You're a smart girl, Maya. Too smart for your own good, just like your father. But you don't understand how the world really works." She turned to Elijah. "I'm offering you a chance to end this peacefully. I'll drop my claim to the estate. I'll walk away from everything. In exchange, you give me $300,000 and promise never to contact the authorities about any of this." Maya's jaw dropped. "You want us to pay you after everything you've done?" "I'm offering you a way out," Victoria snapped. "Take it or leave it. But if you drag me into that courtroom tomorrow, I promise you I will burn everything to the ground. I'll tie up the estate in lawsuits for years. By the time it's all over, there won't be anything left for those precious little girls of yours." The room fell silent. Maya looked at Elijah, trying to read his face. He was staring at Victoria with an expression she couldn't interpret. "Was he actually considering this, Grandpa Eli?" she said urgently. You can't let her win." "I'm not asking him to let me win," Victoria said. "I'm asking him to be reasonable, to think about what's best for everyone, including you." She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I've already had my lawyer draw up the agreement. All you have to do is sign, and this nightmare is over." She held out the paper to Elijah. He didn't move. Victoria's smile began to crack. "Think about it, Elijah. Think about how tired you are, how tired those children are. Do you really want to put them through a long, ugly court battle? Do you really want to risk losing everything on a gamble?" Maya held her breath. Elijah reached out and took the paper from Victoria's hand. He looked at it for a long moment. Then slowly and deliberately he tore it in half. "Get out of my house," he said, "and don't ever come back." Victoria's face twisted with rage. "You're making a mistake. You're all making a terrible mistake." "The only mistake was my best friend marrying you." Elijah's voice was like ice. "Tomorrow morning you're going to face the consequences of everything you've done, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." Victoria stared at him, her chest heaving. For a moment, Maya thought she might attack. The hatred in her eyes was so pure, so intense, that it seemed capable of anything. But then Victoria smiled. It was the coldest, most terrifying smile Maya had ever seen. "You think you've won?" Victoria said softly. "You think this is over, but you have no idea what I'm capable of. You have no idea what I've already done." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the porch. At the bottom of the steps, she paused and looked back. "Enjoy your night, children. It'll be your last peaceful one for a very long time." Then she was gone, swallowed by the darkness. Elijah closed the door and locked it. When he turned around, his face was pale. "What did she mean?" Maya asked. "What has she already done?" Before Elijah could answer, his phone rang. He looked at the screen. His face went white. "Charles, what's wrong?" Maya couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but she could see Elijah's expression changing. Shock, horror, disbelief. "When?" he demanded. "How?" He listened for another moment, then hung up without saying goodbye. "Grandpa Eli," Maya's voice was trembling. "What happened?" Elijah sat down heavily on the nearest chair. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 seconds. "Sandra Mitchell," he said. "The woman who was going to testify against Victoria. What about her?" Elijah looked at her with eyes full of pain. "She's dead. They found her body 20 minutes ago. She was hit by a car outside her apartment building." Maya felt the world spinning around her. "Dead? That's not possible. We just talked to her. She was going to help us. Hit and run. No witnesses, no cameras. The police are calling it an accident." "It wasn't an accident." Maya's voice rose to a scream. "Victoria killed her. Victoria killed her to stop her from testifying." "We can't prove that," Elijah said quietly. "We can't prove anything." Maya collapsed onto the couch beside her sleeping sister. Her whole body was shaking. Sandra was dead. Their only witness was dead. And tomorrow morning they would have to face Victoria in court with nothing but a will that Victoria's lawyers would claim was forged. "What do we do now?" Maya whispered. "How do we fight her without Sandra's testimony?" Elijah was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with exhaustion and grief. "I don't know, Maya. For the first time in my life, I don't know." The clock struck midnight. 6 hours until the hearing. 6 hours to find a way to defeat a woman who was willing to kill to get what she wanted. Maya sat in the darkness listening to her sister breathe and tried to think. There had to be something they were missing. Some piece of evidence they hadn't found. Some weakness in Victoria's armor that they hadn't exploited. Her father had been smart. Her father had been careful. He had hidden the will in the Bible because he knew Victoria would never look there. He had made Elijah their guardian because he knew Elijah could be trusted. But he must have done more. He must have left something else behind, some insurance policy against exactly this situation. Maya thought about everything she knew about her father, the way he always planned ahead, the way he kept meticulous records, the way he told them over and over to trust the Bible and wait for a kind soul. The Bible. Maya sat up straight. She had been so focused on the will hidden in the spine that she had forgotten about the Bible itself, the notes her father had written in the margins, the passages he had underlined, the scraps of paper he had tucked between the pages over the years. She grabbed the Bible from the bag by the door and carried it to the lamp. Her fingers trembled as she opened it, flipping through the pages one by one. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, nothing unusual, Psalms, Proverbs, Isaiah, more underlined passages, more margin notes, but nothing that seemed relevant. Then she reached the book of Matthew. A photograph fell out. Maya caught it before it hit the floor. It was an old photo, faded and creased, showing a young Victoria standing next to a man Maya didn't recognize. They were holding champagne glasses and smiling at the camera. On the back, in her father's handwriting, were 3 words, Victoria's first husband. Maya's heart stopped. She ran to Elijah's bedroom and pounded on the door. "Grandpa Eli, wake up! I found something!" 30 seconds later, Elijah was staring at the photograph with wide eyes. "I knew it, hon," he breathed. "I knew there was something in her past she was hiding." "What does this mean?" Maya demanded. "Why didn't anyone know Victoria was married before—" Elijah grabbed his phone. "Because she didn't want anyone to know. Because something happened to her first husband, something she's been covering up for years." He dialed Charles. "Charles, wake up. I need you to find everything you can about Victoria Ellis before she met Marcus. Marriage records, death certificates, police reports, everything." He paused, listening. "Yes, right now. We have 5 hours until the hearing. This is the break we've been looking for." He hung up and looked at Maya with something like hope in his eyes. "If Victoria's first husband died under suspicious circumstances, and if we can prove she benefited from his death, that changes everything. It establishes a pattern of behavior. It gives the judge reason to question everything she's claimed." "But we only have 5 hours, Maya said. "Is that enough time?" Elijah's jaw set with determination. "It has to be." At 3:47 in the morning, Charles called back. Maya and Elijah huddled over the speakerphone, exhausted, but alert, waiting for news. "I found him," Charles said. "Victoria's first husband was a man named Robert Henderson. They were married in 2008 in Nevada. He died 6 months later." "How did he die?" Elijah asked. "According to the official report, he fell down the stairs in their home, broke his neck. Victoria inherited everything: the house, his savings, his life insurance, about $400,000 total." Maya felt a chill run down her spine, and nobody suspected anything. "There was an investigation. Henderson's sister filed a complaint, said she didn't believe it was an accident, but Victoria was never charged. The case was closed due to insufficient evidence." "Where is the sister now?" Elijah demanded. "Can we reach her?" "That's the interesting part." Charles's voice took on an edge of excitement. "The sister's name is Patricia Henderson. She lives in Atlanta, and she's been trying to get the case reopened for 15 years. Can she testify? I've already called her. She's driving down right now. She'll be here by 7. Maya grabbed Elijah's arm. "We have a witness. We have someone who can tell the court what Victoria really is." "It's not perfect," Charles warned. "The Henderson case was never proven. Victoria was never charged. A good lawyer will argue that it's irrelevant to the current proceedings." "But it establishes pattern," Elijah said. "It shows that Victoria has done this before. It gives the judge reason to believe she would do it again." There was a pause on the line. "There's one more thing," Charles said slowly. I did some digging into Sheriff Frank Dalton, the man who supposedly witnessed Victoria's fake will. And Dalton was the lead investigator on the Robert Henderson case. He's the one who closed it without filing charges. Maya's jaw dropped. So Victoria has had the sheriff in her pocket for 15 years. It explains a lot, Elijah said grimly. It explains how she's been able to get away with everything. How she knew the break-in wouldn't be properly investigated. How she was able to file her fake will without anyone asking questions. Can we use this? Maya asked. Can we tell the judge about the connection? It's risky, Charles admitted. We'd be accusing a sitting sheriff of corruption. If we can't prove it, we could face serious legal consequences. Maya thought about everything Victoria had done. The years of abuse, the night of the funeral, Sandra Mitchell lying dead in the street. I don't care about the risk, she said. Victoria has to be stopped, whatever it takes. Elijah looked at her for a long moment, then he nodded. Charles, get Patricia Henderson to the courthouse by 8:30. Make sure she's ready to testify about her brother's death and Dalton's involvement. And the risk? We'll handle it. Elijah's voice was steel. It's time Victoria Ellis faced the consequences of everything she's done. Dawn broke at 6:15. Maya hadn't slept at all, but she didn't feel tired. Adrenaline was pumping through her veins, keeping her sharp and focused. Zoe woke up at 6:30, confused and frightened by the tension in the house. What's happening, Sol? She asked, rubbing her eyes. Why is everyone awake? Maya knelt down and took her sister's hands. Today is the day, Zoe. Today we go to court and we fight for everything Daddy left us. Are we going to win? Maya thought about Sandra Mitchell dead in the street, about Victoria's cold smile, about the sheriff who had been covering up her crimes for 15 years. I don't know, she said honestly, but we're going to fight as hard as we can, and whatever happens, we're going to face it together. Zoe hugged her tight. I'm scared, Maya. I know, baby, me too, but remember what Daddy always said, brave isn't about not being scared. Brave is about being scared and doing the right thing anyway. Then we'll be brave together. Maya kissed her sister's forehead. Together, always. They arrived at the courthouse at 8:15. Patricia Henderson was already there, a woman in her 60s with gray hair and determined eyes. She shook Elijah's hand firmly. I've been waiting 15 years for this, she said. 15 years to tell the world what Victoria Ellis really is. Are you ready? Elijah asked. I've been ready since the day she killed my brother. Charles appeared with a stack of files. I've got everything. Henderson's death certificate, the original police report records of Dalton's involvement, and bank statements showing suspicious transfers between Victoria and Dalton over the past decade. How did you get all this in one night? Maya asked. Charles smiled grimly. I called in every favor I've ever earned. By the time this is over, I'm going to owe half the lawyers in Georgia. It'll be worth it, Elijah said. Let's go. The courtroom was already filling up when they entered. Maya recognized some of the faces from her father's funeral. Neighbors, business associates, people who had stood by and done nothing while Victoria threw them out into the rain. Today, they would all see the truth. Victoria arrived at 8:45. She walked in like she owned the place, her lawyer, William Barnes, at her side. She wore a black dress, appropriately somber, and her face was a mask of wounded innocence. When she saw Patricia Henderson sitting in the front row, she stopped dead. For just a moment, the mask slipped. Maya saw the fear flash across Victoria's face there and gone in an instant. Then the mask was back, and Victoria took her seat at the plaintiff's table like nothing had happened. But Maya had seen it. Victoria was scared. For the first time since this nightmare began, Victoria was actually scared. All rise, Briam, the bailiff called. The Honorable Judge Margaret Harrison presiding. The judge entered and took her seat. Her eyes swept across the courtroom, taking in everyone present. Be seated. This court is now in session. William Barnes stood immediately. Your Honor. Before we begin, I'd like to register an objection to the presence of Patricia Henderson. She has no standing in this case, and her presence is clearly intended to prejudice the court against my client. Objection overruled, Judge Harrison said calmly. Ms. Henderson has been called as a witness. She has every right to be here. Barnes's face tightened, but he sat down without further argument. Charles stood. Your Honor, we request that this hearing be expanded to include evidence of criminal activity by the plaintiff. We believe that Victoria Ellis has engaged in a pattern of fraud and possibly murder stretching back over 15 years. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Harrison banged her gavel. Order. Mr. Barnes, do you have a response? Barnes was on his feet instantly. This is outrageous, Your Honor. The defense is attempting to smear my client with baseless accusations. These allegations have nothing to do with the current case. On the contrary, Charles said, these allegations establish a clear pattern of behavior. Victoria Ellis has done this before. She married a wealthy man, killed him for his money, and used corrupt law enforcement to cover up the crime. We believe she attempted to do the same thing with Marcus Williams. Victoria jumped to her feet. This is lies, all lies. I loved Marcus. I would never cheat. Sit down, Mrs. Ellis, Judge Harrison snapped. You'll have your chance to respond. Victoria sat her face pale with rage. Judge Harrison turned to Charles. Mr. Mitchell, these are serious allegations. Do you have evidence to support them? We do, Your Honor. Charles picked up a thick folder. We have the testimony of Patricia Henderson, whose brother Robert was Victoria Ellis's first husband. We have police records showing that Sheriff Frank Dalton, who allegedly witnessed Victoria's will, was also the lead investigator who closed the Henderson case without charges. And we have bank records showing regular payments from Victoria Ellis to Sheriff Dalton over the past 15 years. The courtroom exploded again. This time, even the judge's gavel couldn't quiet the uproar immediately. Maya watched Victoria's face. The mask was cracking. The fear was showing through. Order, Judge Harrison shouted. Order in this court. Finally, the noise subsided. Mr. Barnes, the judge said, do you wish to respond to these allegations? Barnes was sweating now. His confident demeanor had vanished. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. My client has not been charged with any crime. These accusations are completely unsubstantiated. Then you won't object to me hearing the evidence, Judge Harrison said. Mr. Mitchell, call your first witness. Charles turned to the gallery. The defense calls Patricia Henderson. Patricia walked to the witness stand with her head held high. She took the oath, sat down, and looked directly at Victoria. Ms. Henderson, Charles began, can you tell the court about your brother Robert Henderson? Robert was my baby brother. Patricia's voice was steady but full of emotion. He was kind and trusting, and he always saw the best in people. That's why he didn't see what Victoria really was until it was too late. When did Robert meet Victoria Ellis? In 2007. She was working as a waitress at a restaurant Robert liked to visit. She was beautiful and charming, and Robert fell for her instantly. And they were married. In 2008, it was a small ceremony. Victoria said she didn't have any family. What happened after the wedding? Patricia's jaw tightened. Victoria changed. She became controlling. She isolated Robert from his friends and family. She convinced him to add her name to all his accounts, to change his will to make her the sole beneficiary. And then, 6 months after the wedding, Robert was dead. Patricia's voice cracked. They said he fell down the stairs, but Robert was an athlete. He was coordinated. He had walked up and down those stairs 1,000 times. He didn't just fall. Did you report your suspicions to the police? I tried, but the lead investigator was a man named Frank Dalton. He refused to take my concerns seriously. He closed the case within a week and ruled it an accident. And Victoria inherited everything. Everything. The house, the savings, the life insurance, almost $400,000. She sold the house within a month and disappeared. I never saw her again until today. Charles turned to the judge. Your Honor, we submit that this testimony establishes a clear pattern. Victoria Ellis has done this before. She married a wealthy man, murdered him, and used a corrupt law enforcement official to cover up the crime. The same official who supposedly witnessed her forged will in the current case. Judge Harrison's face was unreadable, but her eyes were hard as she looked at Victoria. Mrs. Ellis, do you have anything to say in response to these allegations? Victoria stood slowly. Her composure had returned, but Maya could see the cracks beneath the surface. Your Honor, this is nothing but a desperate attempt to destroy my reputation. I loved Robert Henderson. His death was a tragedy, but it was an accident. The police investigated and found no evidence of foul play. And your relationship with Sheriff Dalton? Judge Harrison asked. Victoria hesitated. Just for a moment, but Maya saw it. Frank Dalton is an old friend. We've known each other for years. There's nothing improper about our relationship. Then how do you explain the regular payments you've made to him over the past 15 years? Victoria's face went white. Those were personal loans. He was going through financial difficulties, and I helped him out. 15 years of loans totaling over $200,000. Judge Harrison's voice dripped with skepticism. "I'm a generous person," Victoria said weakly. Maya couldn't stay silent any longer. She jumped to her feet. "She's lying. She lies about everything. She hit my sister. She threw us out of our house. She called us names I can't even repeat. She's been planning this for years, waiting for my father to die so she could steal everything." "Young lady, sit down," Judge Harrison said, but her voice was gentle. "No?" Tears were streaming down Maya's face. "My father was a good man. He loved us more than anything. He knew what Victoria was, and he tried to protect us. That's why he hid the will in the Bible. That's why he made Grandpa Eli our guardian, because he knew Victoria would do this." The courtroom was silent. Judge Harrison looked at Maya for a long moment. Then she turned to Victoria. "Mrs. Ellis, I've heard enough. Based on the evidence presented today, I am ruling that the will you submitted is fraudulent. The original will found in the Bible leaving the entire estate to Maya and Zoe Williams is hereby recognized as the valid last will and testament of Marcus Williams." Victoria's face contorted with rage. "You can't do this. I have rights. I was his wife." Furthermore, Judge Harrison continued, ignoring her outburst, "I am referring this matter to the district attorney for criminal investigation. The allegations of fraud, corruption, and possible murder are serious enough to warrant a full inquiry." She turned to the bailiff. "Take Mrs. Ellis into custody pending the DA's decision on charges." Victoria screamed as two officers approached her. "No, you can't do this to me. I won't let you do this to me." But the officers were already putting her in handcuffs. Maya watched as the woman who had tormented her for 5 years, who had thrown her out into the rain, who had tried to steal everything her father had built, was dragged out of the courtroom, screaming. Zoe grabbed Maya's hand. "Is it over? Did we win?" Maya looked at Elijah, who was wiping tears from his eyes. At Patricia Henderson, who was sobbing with relief. At all the people in the courtroom who were finally seeing Victoria Ellis for what she really was. "Yeah, baby," Maya said, pulling her sister into her arms. "We won." The courtroom erupted into chaos the moment the bailiffs dragged Victoria through the side door. Reporters who had been quietly observing suddenly surged forward, cameras flashing voices shouting questions that nobody could answer. Maya felt Elijah's arm wrap around her shoulders, pulling her and Zoe close as he guided them toward the back exit. "Don't look at them," he said firmly. "Keep your eyes forward. We're almost out." But Maya couldn't help glancing back one last time. Through the crowd, she caught a glimpse of Victoria's face just before the door closed behind her. The hatred in those eyes was so pure, so concentrated that it felt like a physical blow. Victoria mouthed 2 words. "Not over." Then she was gone. Charles met them in the hallway at 9:47. His face was flushed with triumph, but his eyes remained cautious. "We need to get you out of here before the press realizes you've left. I've got a car waiting in the underground parking garage." "What happens now?" Maya asked as they hurried down the corridor. "Is Victoria going to prison?" "That depends on the district attorney, but with the evidence we presented today plus the investigation into Sandra Mitchell's death, I'd say she's looking at multiple felony charges." Charles paused at the elevator and pressed the button. "The problem is William Barnes. He's already filing an emergency appeal. He's claiming the judge was biased and that we ambushed his client with irrelevant evidence." Elijah's jaw tightened. "Can he get the ruling overturned?" "It's unlikely, but not impossible. Appeals courts have been known to do strange things." The elevator doors opened and they stepped inside. "For now, the most important thing is to keep the girls safe. Victoria may be in custody, but she still has friends on the outside." Maya thought about the men who had broken into Elijah's house, about Sandra Mitchell dead in the street, about Sheriff Dalton who had been covering up Victoria's crimes for 15 years. "What about the sheriff?" she asked. "Is he going to be arrested too?" Charles nodded. "The FBI is already involved. Corruption charges, obstruction of justice, possibly accessory to murder. Dalton's career is over. He just doesn't know it yet." The elevator reached the parking garage. A black SUV was waiting with its engine running. Charles opened the back door and ushered the girls inside. "I'll call you as soon as I know more. In the meantime, stay at Elijah's house and don't answer the door for anyone you don't recognize." "Thank you, Charles." Elijah shook the lawyer's hand. "For everything." "Don't thank me yet. This fight isn't over. Victoria Ellis doesn't give up easily." Charles stepped back and closed the door. "Watch your backs." The drive back to Elijah's house took 35 minutes. Maya spent most of it staring out the window, watching the city slide past without really seeing it. Her mind kept returning to Victoria's face, to those 2 words she had mouthed through the crowd. Not over. What did that mean? Victoria was in custody. The judge had ruled against her. The FBI was investigating. How could she possibly hurt them now? Maya... Zoe's small voice pulled her back to the present. "Are you okay?" Maya forced a smile. "I'm fine, baby. Just tired." "You don't look fine. You look scared." Maya couldn't lie to her sister, not after everything they had been through. "I am scared," she admitted. "I'm scared that Victoria is going to find a way to hurt us again. I'm scared that this isn't really over." Zoe took her hand. "But we won. The judge said so." "I know, but Victoria has been planning this for years. She's smart and she's dangerous and she doesn't care who she hurts." Maya squeezed her sister's fingers. "I just want to make sure we're really safe this time." Elijah glanced at them in the rearview mirror. "You are safe. I promise you that. Whatever Victoria tries to do next, we'll be ready for her." "How can you be sure?" Maya asked. "Because I know something Victoria doesn't." Elijah's voice was firm with certainty. "I know that your father was smarter than her. He planned for every possibility. He left us everything we needed to protect you. And if there's one thing I've learned in the past few days, it's that Marcus Williams was always 3 steps ahead." They arrived at the house at 10:22. Elijah pulled into the garage and closed the door behind them before letting the girls out of the car. "Go inside and rest," he said. "I need to make some phone calls." Maya nodded, but instead of heading to the living room, she went to the bag that still sat by the front door. She pulled out the Bible and carried it to the kitchen table. "What are you doing?" Zoe asked, following her. "Looking." Maya opened the Bible and began flipping through the pages, examining every margin note, every underlined passage, every scrap of paper tucked between the pages. "Daddy hid the will in here because he knew we would find it. But what if he hid other things, too? What if there's more we haven't discovered?" Zoe sat down beside her. "Like what?" "I don't know, but Grandpa Eli said Daddy was always 3 steps ahead. That means he would have planned for Victoria trying to fight back. He would have left us something to use against her." They searched for nearly an hour. Maya found old receipts, church bulletins, a pressed flower that might have been from their mother's funeral, but nothing that seemed relevant to their current situation. Then, at 11:18, Zoe gasped. "Maya, look at this." She was holding a small envelope that had been taped to the inside back cover, hidden beneath the leather lining. Maya had looked at that cover a dozen times without noticing it. "How did you find that?" "I felt it when I was running my fingers along the edge." Zoe's hands trembled as she held out the envelope. "What do you think is inside?" Maya took the envelope carefully. It was sealed with their father's handwriting on the front, "For my daughters, in case of emergency." Her heart pounding, Maya tore open the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in their father's neat handwriting, and clipped to it was a small USB drive. Maya began to read aloud. "My dearest Maya and Zoe, if you're reading this, then the worst has happened, and Victoria has tried to take everything from you. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you in person, but I want you to know that I saw her for what she was, and I made sure to gather evidence that would expose her if she ever tried to hurt you." Maya's voice caught in her throat. She forced herself to continue. "The USB drive contains recordings. For the past 2 years, I secretly recorded every conversation Victoria had in our house. I installed hidden microphones in the study, the bedroom, and the living room. I know this might seem paranoid, but I needed to document her true nature in case something happened to me." Zoe's eyes were wide. "Daddy recorded Victoria." Maya kept reading. "On these recordings you will find evidence of Victoria's plans to steal my estate. You will hear her discussing these plans with Sheriff Frank Dalton, with her lawyer William Barnes, and with others whose names I do not know. You will also find a recording from 3 months ago in which Victoria discusses her first husband, Robert Henderson, and admits that his death was not an accident." Maya stopped. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the paper. "She admitted it," she whispered. "She admitted to killing him." "Keep reading," Zoe urged. Maya took a deep breath. "I have made copies of these recordings and stored them in 3 different locations. One copy is with my lawyer to be opened only in the event of my death. One copy is in a safety deposit box at First National Bank account number 7734921, and one copy is on this drive, which I am leaving with you because I trust you, my brave girls, to do what is right." Maya set down the letter and picked up the USB drive. It was small and ordinary looking, but it held the power to destroy Victoria completely. "We have to tell Grandpa Eli," Zoe said. "I know." Maya clutched the drive in her fist. "This changes everything." They found Elijah in his study, still on the phone. When he saw their faces, he immediately ended the call. "What is it? What's wrong?" Maya held up the USB drive. "Daddy left us something else. Recordings. 2 years' worth of recordings of Victoria admitting everything." Elijah's face went pale. Recordings, where did you find this? In the Bible, hidden in the back cover. Maya handed him the letter. Read this. Daddy knew Grandpa Eli. He knew what Victoria was planning, and he gathered evidence to stop her. Elijah read the letter twice, his eyes growing wider with each pass. When he finished, he looked up at the girls with an expression of wonder and grief. Your father, he said slowly. Your father was the smartest man I ever knew, and apparently I still underestimated him. He grabbed his phone and dialed. Charles, drop whatever you're doing. We have something that's going to blow this case wide open. 45 minutes later, Charles arrived at the house with a laptop and a portable speaker. They gathered in the living room, the USB drive sitting on the coffee table like a bomb waiting to explode. Before we listen to this, Charles said, I need to warn you, these recordings may contain disturbing content. Things Victoria said about your father, about you, about her plans. Are you sure you want to hear it? Maya looked at Zoe. Her sister's face was pale but determined. We're sure, Maya said. We need to know the truth. Charles plugged the USB drive into his laptop and opened the first file. For a moment, there was only static. Then voices emerged clear and unmistakable. When are you going to do it? A man's voice, rough and impatient. When the time is right. Victoria. Her voice was different than Maya had ever heard it, cold and calculating, completely devoid of the fake warmth she usually displayed. Marcus has been having chest pains. His doctor says it's stress, but I've been making sure his stress levels stay high. A few more months of this, and nature will take care of the problem for me. And if it doesn't, then I'll find another way. There are drugs that can cause heart attacks, untraceable if you know what you're doing. Either way, Marcus Williams won't live to see his next birthday. Maya felt like she was going to be sick. Victoria had been planning to kill their father. She had been slowly poisoning him, raising his stress, pushing him toward a heart attack that everyone would think was natural. Is there more? Elijah's voice was barely a whisper. Charles nodded and clicked on another file. This one was dated 3 months before their father's death. You're being paranoid. Victoria again sounding annoyed. No one is going to connect me to Robert. That was 15 years ago. But the sister keeps asking questions. The man's voice was different this time, deeper and more authoritative. Maya realized with a shock that it was Sheriff Dalton. She filed another request to reopen the case last month. If anyone starts digging... No one is going to dig. Victoria's voice turned sharp. You made sure of that. Remember, you closed the case. You buried the evidence. You're in this just as deep as I am, Frank. I know that. I'm just saying we need to be careful. We will be. Once Marcus is gone and I have control of his estate, we'll both have enough money to disappear if we need to, but that's not going to happen. Everything is going according to plan. There was a pause. Then Dalton spoke again. What about the kids? What about them? You can't just throw them out on the street. People will ask questions. Victoria laughed, and the sound made Maya's skin crawl. Oh, I'm not going to throw them out right away. I'll play the grieving widow for a few months, talk about how hard it is to raise 2 children alone. And then gradually I'll start telling people how difficult they've become, how they remind me too much of their father, how I can't handle them anymore. And then I'll find a reason to get rid of them. Maybe I'll claim they're violent. Maybe I'll say they need special care that I can't provide. By the time I'm done, everyone will think I'm a saint for trying so hard, and no one will question it when they end up in foster care. Maya was crying now, tears streaming down her face. This was what Victoria had planned for them. Not just throwing them out, but systematically destroying their reputation, turning everyone against them, making sure they ended up alone and abandoned with no one to help them. Turn it off, Zoe whimpered. I don't want to hear any more. Charles paused the recording. I'm sorry. I should have listened to it first before... No. Maya wiped her eyes and sat up straighter. We needed to hear this. We needed to know exactly what Victoria is capable of. Elijah put his arm around both girls. This is the evidence we need. Not just to keep Victoria in prison, but to make sure she never gets out. Charles, how fast can you get this to the district attorney? I can have it on his desk within the hour. Charles was already packing up his laptop. But there's something else on this drive that you need to see first. He clicked on a folder labeled Henderson and opened the first file. Victoria's voice filled the room again, but this time she sounded different. Younger, maybe, or less confident. I didn't mean to kill him. She was crying. You have to believe me. I was so angry. He was going to divorce me. He was going to leave me with nothing. And when I pushed him, I didn't think... It doesn't matter what you meant to do. Dalton's voice younger as well, but with the same authoritative tone. "What matters is what happened. Robert Henderson is dead, and if anyone finds out the truth, you're going to prison for the rest of your life. What am I supposed to do? You're going to let me handle it. I'll make sure the investigation goes nowhere. But after this, you owe me. You understand? For the rest of your life, you owe me." The recording ended. The room was silent. Finally, Elijah spoke. She admitted it. She admitted to killing Robert Henderson, and Dalton helped her cover it up. Charles's face was grim. This recording is over 15 years old, but with Patricia Henderson's testimony and the other evidence we've gathered, it should be enough to charge Victoria with first-degree murder. "And Dalton," Maya asked, "accessory after the fact, obstruction of justice, corruption. He's going to prison for a very long time." Charles stood up and grabbed his briefcase. "I need to get this to the DA immediately. Don't leave the house until you hear from me." He was gone before anyone could respond. Maya sat on the couch, her mind spinning. It was over. It was really over. Victoria had damned herself with her own words, recorded by the man she had been planning to kill. There was no way she could escape now. No appeal, no clever lawyer, no corrupt sheriff could save her. "Maya," Zoe's voice was small and uncertain. "Why did Daddy stay with her if he knew what she was? Why didn't he just divorce her?" It was a question Maya had been asking herself for the past 2 days. Why had their father endured a loveless marriage, lived with a woman who was planning to kill him, allowed his daughters to be mistreated behind his back? "I think," Elijah said slowly, "he was afraid. Afraid of what Victoria might do if he tried to leave. Afraid of what Dalton might do with his connections in law enforcement. Marcus knew he was trapped, so he did the only thing he could do. He gathered evidence and made plans to protect his daughters, even if he couldn't protect himself." "He sacrificed himself for us," Maya whispered. "In a way, yes." Elijah's voice was thick with emotion. "He knew that if he died, Victoria would show her true colors. He knew that you would find the will and the recordings, and he trusted that you would be brave enough and smart enough to use them." Maya looked down at the Bible in her lap. Her father had left them a roadmap. Every clue, every piece of evidence, every hidden message had led them to this moment. He had been guiding them from beyond the grave, making sure they had everything they needed to defeat the woman who had destroyed their family. "Thank you, Daddy," she whispered. "Thank you for not giving up on us." The phone rang at 1:47 in the afternoon. Elijah answered immediately. "Charles, what's happening?" Maya and Zoe crowded close, trying to hear the conversation. The DA listened to the recordings. Charles's voice was triumphant. "He's filing murder charges against Victoria for Robert Henderson's death, plus conspiracy to commit murder for her plans against Marcus. Combined with the fraud charges and the evidence linking her to Sandra Mitchell's death, she's looking at multiple life sentences." "What about Dalton?" "FBI arrested him an hour ago. He's already trying to cut a deal offering to testify against Victoria in exchange for a reduced sentence. The whole network is collapsing." Maya felt a weight lift from her chest. It was really happening. Victoria and everyone who had helped her were finally facing justice. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we wait for the trial. It could take months, maybe longer, but in the meantime, the estate freeze has been lifted. The house belongs to you and Zoe, along with everything else your father left you." Maya looked at Elijah. "The house. We can go home." Elijah nodded, but his expression was complicated. "If that's what you want, but you don't have to decide right now. You've been through a lot. You can stay here as long as you need." Maya thought about the house where she had been born, the bedroom she had shared with Zoe, the kitchen where their father had made them pancakes every Sunday morning, the living room where Victoria had slapped her sister and thrown them out into the rain. "I don't know if I can go back there," she admitted. "Not yet, maybe not ever." "That's okay," Elijah squeezed her shoulder. "This is your home now too, and it always will be." Zoe tugged on Maya's sleeve. "Can we visit the house though, just to get some of our things? I miss my other dolls. And my purple blanket." Maya smiled at her sister. Despite everything, Zoe was still thinking about the simple things, the comfortable, familiar things that made a house feel like home. "Yeah, baby. We can do that." They drove to the house the next morning. It was strange approaching the place they had lived their entire lives as visitors rather than residents. The lawn was overgrown, the flowers in the garden wilting from neglect. A notice from the county was posted on the front door, but Elijah peeled it off and threw it away. "You have every right to be here," he said. "This is your property now." Maya took a deep breath and put her key in the lock. For a moment, she was afraid it wouldn't work, that Victoria had changed the locks before she was arrested, but the key turned smoothly and the door swung open. The house smelled different, stale and empty, like nobody had been there in weeks, which Maya realized was probably true. Victoria had been in custody for almost 48 hours, and before that, she had likely been too busy plotting to spend much time at home. "It's so quiet," Zoe whispered. Maya nodded. The house had always been full of tension when Victoria was there, a constant undercurrent of fear and hostility. Now that she was gone, the silence felt almost peaceful. "Let's get your things," Maya said, "and then we can go." They climbed the stairs to their old bedroom. Everything was exactly as they had left it, minus the belongings Victoria had thrown onto the porch. Maya found Zoe's purple blanket folded on her bed, untouched. She gathered up the dolls that lined the windowsill, the books stacked on the dresser, the small jewelry box that had belonged to their mother. "Maya, look." Zoe was standing in front of the closet holding a photograph. It showed their father sitting on the porch swing, Maya on one knee and Zoe on the other. They were all smiling, caught in a moment of pure, uncomplicated happiness. Maya took the photograph and held it gently. She remembered that day. It had been Zoe's 6th birthday. Their father had made a chocolate cake from scratch, even though he had burnt the first 2 attempts. They had eaten ice cream until their stomachs hurt and stayed up late watching movies until they fell asleep in his arms. "He loved us so much," Maya said. "He really, really loved us." "I know," Zoe wrapped her arms around her sister. "And he's still watching over us. I can feel it." They packed everything they wanted into boxes and carried them downstairs. Elijah helped them load the car, then paused at the front door. "Is there anything else?" he asked. "Anything from other rooms?" Maya thought about it. There were things of their father's that she wanted. His watch, which he had worn every day, the books in his study, the photographs that lined the hallway. But there was something else she needed first. "The study," she said. "Daddy's study. Victoria never let us go in there after he died." They found the door locked, but Elijah had brought a set of tools just in case. Within minutes, the lock gave way and the door swung open. The study was dusty and undisturbed. Victoria clearly hadn't spent any time here. Their father's desk was covered in papers, his bookshelf full of the business books and histories he had loved. On the wall hung his diplomas, his awards, photographs of him with clients and colleagues and friends. And in the corner behind a panel that Maya had never noticed before was a safe. "Grandpa Eli," Maya breathed. "Look at this." Elijah examined the safe carefully. It was small but sturdy with an electronic keypad lock. "Do you know the combination?" he asked. Maya thought hard. Her father had been careful about passwords and codes. He never used obvious things like birthdays or anniversaries. But he had once told her that the most important numbers were the ones that meant something to your heart. She tried their mother's birthday. The light blinked red. She tried her own birthday, then Zoe's. Red both times. She was about to give up when Zoe spoke. "Try the day Mama and Daddy got married." Maya looked at her sister. "How do you know that date?" "I found it once in Daddy's wallet. He carried a little card with their anniversary written on it. He said it was the happiest day of his life." Maya entered the numbers. June 15, 2008, 06:15:08. The light blinked green, and the safe clicked open. Inside were stacks of cash, maybe $50,000 or more. There were also documents, insurance policies, property deeds, stock certificates. Everything Victoria had claimed to have taken from the safe on the day of the funeral. "She lied," Maya said. "She said she cleaned out the safe, but she never even found it." "She didn't know about this one." Elijah pulled out the documents and began examining them. "Your father must have had a second safe installed, one that Victoria didn't know about. A backup in case his first hiding place was compromised." Maya laughed. It was the first genuine laugh she had experienced in days. Her father had outsmarted Victoria at every turn. Even from beyond the grave, he had protected his daughters from the woman who had tried to destroy them. "Is there anything else?" she asked. Elijah reached deeper into the safe and pulled out one more item, a small velvet box. He opened it carefully. Inside were 2 rings. Simple gold bands with small diamonds, clearly meant for someone with delicate fingers. "These were your mother's," Elijah said softly. "Her engagement ring and wedding band. Your father must have kept them safe so that one day he could give them to you." Maya took the box with trembling hands. She had never seen her mother's rings before. Victoria had claimed they were lost sold years ago to pay for household expenses. But Victoria had lied about everything. Maya slipped one ring onto her own finger. It was slightly too big, but it felt right somehow. Like a piece of her mother was finally with her again. "Zoe," she held out the other ring. "This one is for you, for when you're older." Zoe took the ring and clutched it against her chest. "I'll keep it forever, I promise." They left the house at 4:32 in the afternoon, their car loaded with boxes of memories and treasures they had thought were lost forever. As they pulled out of the driveway, Maya looked back one last time at the house where she had been born. She didn't know if she would ever live there again, but for the first time she understood that home wasn't about a building. Home was about the people you loved and the memories you carried with you, and those things Victoria could never take away. 3 weeks passed. The trial was set for the following spring, giving the prosecutors time to build their case and the defense time to prepare their arguments. Not that it would matter. The recordings Maya's father had made were damning beyond any reasonable doubt. Victoria's own words would condemn her. Maya and Zoe settled into a new routine at Elijah's house. They started at a new school, made new friends, and slowly began to heal from the trauma of everything they had endured. Zoe had nightmares sometimes, waking up screaming that Victoria was coming for them. But Maya was always there, took to hold her to remind her that they were safe, that the monster couldn't hurt them anymore. On a Tuesday afternoon in late October, Charles called with news. Victoria's lawyer filed a motion to suppress the recordings. He said, "They're claiming Marcus violated wiretapping laws and that the evidence should be thrown out." Maya's heart sank. Can they do that? They can try, but Georgia is a one-party consent state for recordings. Marcus was present during all the conversations he recorded, which means he had every legal right to document them. The motion doesn't have a chance of succeeding, but it might delay the trial by a few weeks. What about the murder charges? Those are proceeding on schedule. Patricia Henderson gave her deposition yesterday. She was incredible. By the time she was done, there wasn't a person in the room who didn't believe Victoria killed her brother. Maya let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. So it's really going to happen. Victoria is really going to prison. For the rest of her life. Charles's voice was confident. Multiple murder charges, fraud, conspiracy. Even if by some miracle she beats one charge, she'll never beat them all. Victoria Ellis is done. Maya hung up the phone and walked to the window. Outside, Zoe was playing in the garden, chasing butterflies and laughing in the sunshine. She looked happy. She looked like a normal 8-year-old girl without a care in the world. That was all Maya had ever wanted. For her sister to be safe and happy. For them to have a chance at a normal life. And now, finally, they did. What did Charles say, Tull? Elijah appeared beside her, a cup of coffee in his hand. Victoria's lawyers are trying to suppress the recordings, but Charles doesn't think it'll work. It won't. Elijah put his hand on her shoulder. Your father made sure of that. He covered every angle, anticipated every move. Victoria doesn't stand a chance. Maya nodded, but something was still bothering her, a feeling she couldn't quite shake. Grandpa Eli, do you think she'll ever accept it, that she lost? Elijah was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. Victoria Ellis is the kind of person who always believes she's the smartest one in the room. She spent her whole life manipulating people, lying, scheming, killing to get what she wanted. And for a long time it worked. She got away with murder. She married a wealthy man and planned to steal his fortune. She thought she was untouchable. Stay? He paused, looking out at Zoe playing in the garden. But she underestimated your father, and she underestimated you. She never imagined that 2 little girls could be brave enough and smart enough to take her down. And now she's going to spend the rest of her life in a prison cell with nothing to do but think about how badly she miscalculated. That doesn't answer my question. Elijah smiled sadly. No, I don't think she'll ever accept it. Victoria will go to her grave believing she was cheated, that the world was unfair to her, that she deserved better. But that's her burden to carry, not yours. You've done everything you could do. Now it's time to let go and live your life. Maya watched her sister catch a butterfly, then carefully release it. Zoe looked up and waved her face bright with joy. I think I can do that, Maya said. I think I'm ready. That night, for the first time in weeks, Maya slept without dreaming. She woke the next morning to the smell of pancakes and the sound of Zoe's laughter coming from the kitchen. She lay in bed for a moment, savoring the feeling of peace that had settled over her heart. Then she got up, got dressed, and went to join her family. The morning of the trial arrived on a cold day in March, 6 months after Victoria Ellis had been dragged out of Judge Harrison's courtroom in handcuffs. Maya woke before dawn, her stomach twisted with a mix of anticipation and dread. Today was the day. Today, everything would finally be decided. Zoe was already awake, sitting on the edge of her bed with her doll clutched against her chest. I couldn't sleep, she whispered. I kept thinking about what's going to happen. Maya crossed the room and sat beside her sister. Whatever happens, we're going to face it together, just like always. But what if something goes wrong? What if Victoria gets away with it? She won't. Maya's voice was firm, even though her own heart was racing. The evidence is too strong. The recordings, the witnesses, everything. Victoria is going to prison, and she's never getting out. Elijah knocked on their door at 6:15. Girls, it's time to get ready. We need to leave in an hour. The drive to the courthouse took 45 minutes. Maya spent most of it staring out the window, watching the city wake up around them. Ordinary people going about their ordinary lives, unaware that today was the most important day in the lives of two little girls who had lost everything and fought to get it back. Charles met them at the entrance at 7:32. He was carrying a thick briefcase and wearing his most serious expression. The prosecution is confident, he said as they walked through security. Victoria's lawyers have been trying to cut a deal for weeks, but the DA isn't interested. He wants the maximum sentence on all charges. What about Victoria? Maya asked. How is she? Charles hesitated. She's different. The months in custody have changed her. She's lost weight, lost that confidence she always had. When I saw her at the pretrial hearing, she looked like a shell of the woman she used to be. Maya didn't feel sorry for her. She couldn't, not after everything Victoria had done. The courtroom was already filling up when they entered. Reporters lined the back rows, their cameras and notebooks ready to capture every moment. Patricia Henderson sat in the front row, her face set with determination. Other witnesses Maya didn't recognize filled the seats around her. And then Victoria was brought in. Charles was right. She looked nothing like the woman who had thrown Maya and Zoe out into the rain. Her hair was streaked with gray and pulled back in a limp ponytail. Her face was pale and drawn, with dark circles under her eyes. She wore an orange jumpsuit that hung loose on her diminished frame. But when her eyes found Maya across the courtroom, they were still full of hatred, still full of that cold, calculating rage that had haunted Maya's nightmares for months. Victoria smiled. It was the same smile she had given them on the night she drove away Sandra Mitchell. The same smile she had worn when she threatened them in Elijah's living room. The same smile that promised this wasn't over. Maya felt Zoe's hand slip into hers. She squeezed it tight and refused to look away. All rise, the bailiff called. The Superior Court of Chatham County is now in session, the Honorable Judge Margaret Harrison presiding. Judge Harrison entered and took her seat. Her eyes swept across the courtroom, pausing briefly on Maya and Zoe before moving to Victoria. Be seated. This court is now in session for the matter of the State of Georgia versus Victoria Ellis Williams. Mrs. Williams, you have been charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder fraud, witness tampering, and obstruction of justice. How do you plead? Victoria stood slowly, her chains rattling. Not guilty, Your Honor. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Maya felt her jaw tighten. Even now, after everything, Victoria was still lying, still refusing to accept responsibility for what she had done. Very well. Judge Harrison turned to the prosecution. Mr. District Attorney, you may present your opening statement. The DA was a tall black man in his 50s named Robert Jackson. He had been personally handling the case ever since the FBI investigation began, and Maya had met with him several times over the past months. He was kind but fierce, the kind of lawyer who believed in justice with every fiber of his being. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he began. Over the next several days, you will hear evidence that will shock and disturb you. You will hear how the defendant, Victoria Ellis Williams, systematically planned, depict, and executed the murder of her first husband, Robert Henderson, 15 years ago. You will hear how she used a corrupt law enforcement official to cover up that crime and escape justice. He paused, letting his words sink in. You will hear how she then married Marcus Williams, a successful businessman and devoted father of 2 young girls. You will hear how she spent 5 years pretending to love him while secretly planning to steal his fortune. You will hear recordings in which she admits to slowly poisoning him, raising his stress levels to induce a heart attack, and preparing to claim his entire estate after his death. Jackson turned and pointed directly at Victoria. And you will hear how when her plans were threatened, she arranged for the murder of a key witness. Sandra Mitchell, who was prepared to testify that Victoria paid her to forge a fraudulent will, was killed in a hit-and-run accident that was anything but accidental. The courtroom was silent. Even the reporters had stopped writing, transfixed by the weight of the accusations. By the time this trial is over, Jackson continued, you will have no doubt that Victoria Ellis Williams is a cold-blooded murderer who has spent her entire adult life preying on vulnerable people, and you will have no choice but to find her guilty on all charges. He returned to his seat. Maya released a breath she didn't know she had been holding. Victoria's lawyer, William Barnes, stood for the defense's opening statement. He was a slick man in an expensive suit, the kind of lawyer who made his living defending people who could afford to buy their way out of trouble. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said smoothly, "the prosecution would have you believe that my client is some kind of criminal mastermind, a black widow who has spent decades manipulating and murdering her way through life. But the truth is far simpler and far sadder." He walked toward the jury box, his voice dropping to a confidential tone. "Victoria Williams is not a murderer. She is a victim of circumstance, of coincidence, of a family that has spent the past 6 months trying to destroy her reputation to get their hands on a fortune that rightfully belongs to her." Maya's fists clenched. She wanted to stand up and scream that Victoria was lying, that she was the one who had tried to destroy them. But Charles had warned her to stay calm, to let the evidence speak for itself. "The recordings you will hear," Barnes continued, "were obtained illegally by a paranoid husband who was convinced his wife was out to get him. They are incomplete, taken out of context, and prove nothing except that Marcus Williams was a deeply disturbed man. As for the death of Robert Henderson, that was a tragic accident investigated and closed by law enforcement 15 years ago. The prosecution is attempting to retry a case that was never a case to begin with, using the testimony of a bitter sister who has spent over a decade nursing a grudge." Barnes shook his head sadly. "Victoria Williams is not the monster the prosecution wants you to believe she is. She is a grieving widow who lost her husband and then found herself under attack by his family and friends. All she wanted was what was promised to her. All she wanted was justice." He sat down. Maya leaned over to Charles. "He's lying. He's making Victoria sound like the victim." "That's his job," Charles whispered back. "But don't worry. The evidence will speak for itself. By the time the prosecution is done, no one in that jury box will have any sympathy for Victoria Ellis." The first witness was Patricia Henderson. She walked to the stand with her head held high, the same determination in her eyes that Maya had seen on the day of the first hearing. She took the oath and sat down. Her stuff were her hands folded in her lap. "Mrs. Henderson," Jackson began, "can you tell the court about your brother Robert?" "Robert was my baby brother." Patricia's voice was steady but full of emotion. "He was 7 years younger than me. When our parents died, I practically raised him. He was kind and trusting, maybe too trusting. He always wanted to see the best in people, even when they didn't deserve it." "And when did Robert meet the defendant?" "In 2007, Victoria was working as a waitress at a restaurant Robert liked. She was beautiful and charming, and Robert fell for her immediately. I tried to warn him that she was moving too fast, that something didn't feel right, but he wouldn't listen. He was in love." "What happened after they got married?" "Victoria changed almost immediately. She became controlling, isolating Robert from his friends and family. She convinced him to add her name to all his accounts, to change his will, to make her the sole beneficiary. Within 6 months, she had complete control over his life." "And then," Patricia's voice cracked, "and then Robert died. They said he fell down the stairs. But Robert was an athlete, a former college basketball player. He was coordinated and careful. He didn't just fall." "Did you report your suspicions to the police?" "I tried, but the lead investigator was a man named Frank Dalton. He refused to take my concerns seriously. He closed the case within a week and ruled it an accident." Patricia looked directly at Victoria. "I knew then that something was wrong, that Victoria had gotten to him somehow. But I couldn't prove it. I couldn't prove anything." "What happened to Victoria after Robert's death?" "She inherited everything. The house, the savings, the life insurance. Almost $400,000 in total. She sold the house within a month and disappeared. I spent years trying to find her, trying to get the case reopened, but nobody would listen." Jackson nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. No further questions." Barnes stood for cross-examination. "Mrs. Henderson, isn't it true that you had a contentious relationship with your brother before his death?" Patricia's jaw tightened. "We disagreed about Victoria, that's all." "Isn't it true that you told Robert he was making a mistake marrying her, that you threatened to cut him out of your life if he went through with the wedding?" "I was trying to protect him." "But you failed, didn't you? And now 15 years later, you're still trying to find someone to blame for your brother's accident." "It wasn't an accident. That's what you believe. But the police investigated and found no evidence of foul play. Isn't that correct?" Patricia's face was red with anger. "The police didn't investigate. Frank Dalton covered it up. He was in Victoria's pocket from the beginning." "That's quite an accusation, Mrs. Henderson. Do you have any proof?" The FBI has proof. They've been investigating Dalton for months. They found payments from Victoria going back 15 years. Barnes smiled thinly. Alleged payments, unverified claims. Nothing that has been proven in a court of law. The trial isn't over yet, Patricia shot back. By the time it is, everyone will know the truth about your client. Judge Harrison intervened. That's enough. Mr. Barnes, do you have any further questions for this witness? No, Your Honor. Mrs. Henderson, you may step down. The next several hours were filled with technical testimony. FBI agents explained the forensic analysis of the payments between Victoria and Dalton. Bank officials confirmed the paper trail that connected the defendant to the corrupt sheriff. Medical experts testified about the suspicious circumstances of Robert Henderson's death, and then at 3:47 in the afternoon, the prosecution played the recordings. Maya had heard them before, but listening to them in the courtroom with Victoria sitting just 20 feet away felt different, more real, more damning. Victoria's voice filled the room cold and calculating, and discussing her plans to kill Marcus Williams, talking about drugs that could cause heart attacks, laughing about how she would throw his daughters out on the street. Several members of the jury looked physically ill. One woman wiped tears from her eyes. A man in the back row shook his head in disbelief. And then came the Henderson recording. I didn't mean to kill him, I just pushed him and he fell. The courtroom exploded. Reporters shouted questions. Jury members gasped. Victoria buried her face in her hands. Judge Harrison banged her gavel repeatedly. Order, order in this court. It took nearly 5 minutes to restore calm. When the noise finally subsided, Jackson addressed the jury. You have heard the defendant, in her own words, admit to killing Robert Henderson. You have heard her confess to pushing him down the stairs, causing the injuries that ended his life. This is not speculation. This is not circumstantial evidence. This is the truth spoken by Victoria Ellis Williams herself. He let the words hang in the air. The defense will try to convince you that these recordings are fake or taken out of context or somehow unreliable, but you heard what you heard, and no amount of legal maneuvering can change that. Barnes tried to recover during cross-examination, questioning the authenticity of the recordings, suggesting they had been edited or manipulated, but the FBI expert was unshakable. The recordings were genuine. They had been verified by 3 independent laboratories. There was no doubt about their authenticity. By the time the court adjourned for the day, Maya could see defeat in Barnes's eyes. He knew he was losing. He knew there was nothing he could do to save his client. But Victoria still smiled at Maya as she was led from the courtroom. That same cold, knowing smile that promised revenge. She's not done, Maya whispered to Elijah. I can see it in her eyes. She's planning something. Elijah put his arm around her. Whatever she's planning, it's too late. The evidence is overwhelming. The jury will convict her. But what if she tries to hurt us? What if she has people on the outside? The FBI has been monitoring all her communications. If she tries to contact anyone, they'll know immediately. Elijah's voice was reassuring, but Maya could see the concern in his eyes. We just have to get through the next few days. Once the verdict comes in, Victoria will be locked away forever. The trial continued for 3 more days. The prosecution called witness after witness, building an airtight case that left no room for doubt. Former employees of Marcus Williams testified about Victoria's controlling behavior. Neighbors described seeing the twins locked out of the house for hours at a time. A forensic accountant detailed the systematic way Victoria had been draining Marcus's accounts in the months before his death. And then, on the morning of the 4th day, the prosecution called its final witness, Maya Williams. She had known this moment was coming. Charles had prepared her for weeks, coaching her on what to say and how to say it. But nothing could have prepared her for the feeling of walking to the witness stand, of sitting down and looking out at a courtroom full of strangers who were waiting to hear her story. And nothing could have prepared her for meeting Victoria's eyes. Maya, Jackson said gently, I know this is difficult. Take your time. Maya nodded, her mouth dry. I'm ready. Besoin? Can you describe your relationship with the defendant before your father's death? Maya took a deep breath. Victoria was always cold to us. Even when Daddy was alive, she never acted like she loved us. She would lock us in our room for hours when he wasn't home. Sometimes she wouldn't let us eat dinner. She told us we were worthless and that nobody would ever want us. Did you tell your father about this treatment? No, we were scared. Victoria told us that if we said anything, she would make our lives even worse. And she said nobody would believe us anyway, because we were just kids. What happened on the day of your father's funeral? Maya felt tears prick at her eyes, but she forced them back. Victoria threw us out. She slapped my sister. She called us names I can't repeat. She said we didn't deserve to live in her house anymore. She said our kind didn't belong there. Your kind, Jackson repeated. She meant because we're black. Maya's voice hardened. Victoria always hated us. I think she hated us from the moment she met us. She just pretended for Daddy's sake. What happened after you left the house? We walked in the rain. We didn't have anywhere to go. We thought we were going to die out there alone and cold and forgotten. Maya's voice broke. But then Grandpa Eli found us. He took us in and kept us safe. And when we found the will Daddy had hidden in the Bible, we knew we had a chance to fight back. Jackson nodded. Thank you, Maya. I have just one more question. When you look at the defendant now, what do you see? Maya turned and looked directly at Victoria. For a long moment she didn't speak. I see a monster, she said finally. I see someone who pretended to love my father while planning to kill him. I see someone who hurt my sister and tried to destroy our lives. I see someone who doesn't deserve mercy or forgiveness or second chances. She paused, her voice dropping. But I also see someone who lost. Someone who spent her whole life lying and scheming and hurting people, and in the end, it wasn't enough, because my father was smarter than her, and my sister and I were stronger than she ever expected. Maya stood up straighter, her chin lifted. Victoria Ellis took everything from us, our father, our home, our sense of safety, but she couldn't take the one thing that mattered most. She couldn't take our love for each other, and she couldn't take the truth. The courtroom was silent. Jackson let the moment breathe. No further questions, Your Honor. Barnes declined to cross-examine. He knew that attacking a child who had just delivered such powerful testimony would only hurt his client more. Judge Harrison turned to the jury. This court will take a brief recess while the defense prepares its closing argument. We will reconvene in 1 hour. Maya stepped down from the witness stand. Zoe was waiting for her at the gate, her eyes full of tears. You were so brave, Zoe whispered. So brave. Maya hugged her sister tight. We both were. From the very beginning, we both were. The closing arguments lasted 2 hours. Barnes tried everything. He attacked the credibility of the witnesses, questioned the chain of custody on the evidence, suggested that Marcus Williams had been mentally unstable when he made the recordings. He painted Victoria as a victim of circumstance, a woman who had been unfairly targeted by a family that wanted to steal her inheritance. But everyone could see it wasn't working. The jury's faces were closed, their minds already made up. They had heard Victoria's own words. They had seen the evidence. They knew the truth. Jackson's closing was simple and devastating. Victoria Ellis Williams is a murderer, not an alleged murderer, not a suspected murderer, a murderer. You heard her confess to killing Robert Henderson. You heard her plan to kill Marcus Williams. You have seen the evidence of her crimes documented and verified beyond any reasonable doubt. He turned to face Victoria. This woman has spent her entire life hurting innocent people. She killed a man who loved her and trusted her. She married another man with the intention of killing him too. She abused 2 innocent children and threw them out on the street the day of their father's funeral. And when a witness came forward to expose her lies, she had that witness killed. He turned back to the jury. Victoria Ellis Williams is a monster, and monsters belong in cages. I ask you to find her guilty on all charges and ensure that she never has the opportunity to hurt anyone again. The jury retired to deliberate at 4:17 in the afternoon. Maya sat in the hallway with Zoe and Elijah waiting. Minutes stretched into hours. The sun set, the courthouse emptied. Still they waited. At 8:32 the bailiff emerged. The jury has reached a verdict. Maya's heart stopped. She grabbed Zoe's hand and held on tight as they walked back into the courtroom. Judge Harrison took her seat. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman stood. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Robert Henderson, how do you find guilty? A gasp ran through the courtroom. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder in the planned death of Marcus Williams, how do you find guilty? Zoe squeezed Maya's hand so hard it hurt. On the charge of fraud, guilty. On the charge of witness tampering, guilty. On the charge of obstruction of justice, guilty. Victoria collapsed in her chair, her face buried in her hands. Barnes put his arm around her, but there was nothing he could do. Nothing anyone could do. Judge Harrison turned to Victoria. Mrs. Williams, you have been found guilty on all charges. Sentencing will take place in 30 days. Until then, you will remain in custody without bail. She banged her gavel. This court is adjourned. The courtroom erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Patricia Henderson wept with relief. Charles embraced Elijah, tears streaming down his face. And in the middle of it all, Maya and Zoe held each other and cried. It was over. It was finally over. 1 month later, on a warm spring morning, Maya and Zoe returned to the courthouse for Victoria's sentencing. The courtroom was packed. Every seat was filled, and people lined the walls, waiting to witness the final chapter of the Victoria Ellis story. News cameras were positioned at the back, ready to broadcast the moment to the world. Victoria was brought in looking even more diminished than she had during the trial. The fight had gone out of her. Her eyes were hollow, her movements slow and defeated. Judge Harrison wasted no time. Victoria Ellis Williams, you have been convicted of murder, conspiracy, fraud, and numerous other charges. Your crimes span more than 15 years and have destroyed multiple lives. You have shown no remorse and accepted no responsibility for your actions. She paused, her voice hardening. It is therefore the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. You will serve this sentence at the Georgia Women's Correctional Institution, where you will remain until the end of your natural life. Victoria didn't react. She just stared straight ahead, empty and broken. Additionally, Judge Harrison continued, all assets in your possession are hereby ordered to be returned to the Williams estate for the benefit of Maya and Zoe Williams, the rightful heirs of Marcus Williams. She turned to the girls. Maya, Zoe, I want you to know that what you did took incredible courage. You stood up against a powerful and dangerous woman, and you won. Your father would be proud of you. I am proud of you. Maya felt tears rolling down her cheeks, but for the first time in months, they were tears of joy. This case is closed, Judge Harrison said. May justice be served. She banged her gavel one final time. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded Maya and Elijah, shouting questions and thrusting microphones in their faces. But Maya wasn't looking at them. She was looking at her sister, at the smile that had finally returned to Zoe's face, at the joy that had replaced the fear and pain of the past year. Maya, a reporter called out, how does it feel to finally have justice? Maya thought about everything they had been through, the night of the funeral, the rain, the fear, the moment when Victoria slapped her sister, the discovery of the will, the break-in, the trial, and she thought about her father, about the man who had loved them so much that he had planned for this moment, who had left them everything they needed to fight back, who had believed in them even when he couldn't be there to protect them. It feels like a new beginning, she said, for me and my sister, for everyone Victoria hurt. Justice doesn't erase the pain, but it means something. It means the truth matters. It means good people can win even when the odds are against them. She looked down at Zoe and smiled. Our father used to tell us that when we're scared, we should wait for a kind soul to help us. He said kind people always come when you need them most. And he was right. People came. Good people who believed in us and fought for us and refused to give up. Maya squeezed her sister's hand. Victoria thought she could destroy us. She thought she could take everything and leave us with nothing. But she was wrong. Because she could never take what really mattered. She could never take our love for each other. She could never take our father's memory. And she could never take the truth. She turned away from the cameras and walked down the courthouse steps, her sister on one side and Elijah on the other. 3 months later, on a bright June afternoon, Maya and Zoe stood in front of their old house for the first time since the trial. It looked different now. Elijah had hired people to clean it up, to plant new flowers in the garden, to repair the damage that months of neglect had caused. It looked like a home again, like the home Maya remembered from before Victoria had poisoned everything with her presence. Are you ready? Elijah asked. Maya looked at Zoe. Her sister nodded. We're ready. They walked up the front steps together. Maya put her key in the lock and turned it. The door swung open and they stepped inside. The house smelled different. Fresh and clean like new beginnings. All of Victoria's things were gone, donated to charity, or thrown away. In their place were photographs of their father, of their mother, of the family they had once been. Zoe ran to the living room and stopped in front of the fireplace. Above the mantel hung a portrait Maya had never seen before. It showed Marcus Williams sitting on the porch swing, Maya on one knee and Zoe on the other. The same photograph they had found in their old bedroom, but larger, beautifully framed. Where did this come from? Zoe asked. Your grandfather had it made, Elijah said. He wanted you to have something to remember him by. Maya stared at the portrait, at her father's smiling face, at the love in his eye. We'll never forget him, she whispered. Never. They explored the house room by room, rediscovering the spaces that had once been their entire world. Maya's old bedroom where she had slept every night until Victoria threw them out. The kitchen where their father had made pancakes every Sunday morning. The study where they had found the safe and the evidence that had saved them. And finally, the backyard. Elijah had planted a tree there. a young magnolia strong and beautiful, its white flowers just beginning to bloom. "What's this?" Maya asked. "A memorial," Elijah said, "for your father, so you'll always have a place to come when you want to feel close to him." Maya walked to the tree and placed her hand on its trunk. She closed her eyes and thought about her father, about his laugh, about his hugs, about the way he always knew exactly what to say when she was scared or sad. "Thank you, Daddy," she whispered. "Thank you for everything." Zoe came to stand beside her. She took out her mother's ring, the one they had found in the safe, and tied it to one of the tree's branches with a piece of ribbon. "So Mama can watch over the tree," she explained, "and Mama and Daddy can be together forever." "Schitten!" Maya pulled her sister into her arms. "That's perfect, baby. Absolutely perfect." They stood there for a long time, two sisters holding each other under the magnolia tree, surrounded by the ghosts of the people they had loved and lost. But they weren't sad, not anymore, because they had survived. They had fought back against the darkness and won. They had proven that love was stronger than hate, that truth was stronger than lies, that two little girls from Savannah could take on a monster and emerge victorious. Elijah came to stand beside them. He put his arms around both girls and held them close. "Welcome home," he said. Maya looked at the house where she had been born, at the tree that would grow for decades to come, at the sister who had been her rock through everything, and at the man who had become their family when they needed one most. "We are home," she said. "Finally." That night, Maya sat at her father's old desk and opened his Bible. She turned to the page where he had written his message, the words that had guided them through the darkest time of their lives. "When you are afraid, put your hand on this book and wait. God always sends a kind soul to those who need one." She picked up a pen and added her own words below his. Daddy was right. Kind souls came. And now we're not afraid anymore. We're safe. We're loved. We're home. Thank you, Daddy, for everything, for always believing in us, for protecting us even when you couldn't be here. We love you forever. She closed the Bible and placed it on the shelf beside her bed. Outside, the stars were coming out. Zoe was already asleep in the next room, peaceful and content. Elijah was downstairs reading by the fire. Maya looked out the window at the magnolia tree, its white flowers glowing in the moonlight. She thought about everything that had happened, the pain and the fear and the moments when she had believed all was lost, the courage it had taken to stand up and fight, the people who had helped them along the way. And she thought about the future, about school and friends and all the normal things that had seemed impossible just a year ago, about growing up and going to college and becoming the person her father had always believed she could be. Victoria Ellis had tried to destroy them. She had lied and cheated and killed to get what she wanted. She had thrown two innocent children out into the rain and expected them to disappear. But Maya and Zoe Williams had refused to disappear. They had stood up, they had fought back, they had won, and now they had the rest of their lives to prove that Victoria Ellis had been wrong about everything. Maya smiled and turned away from the window. Tomorrow would be the first day of the rest of her life. A life built on love and truth and the unbreakable bond between two sisters who had faced the darkness together and emerged into the light. Victoria Ellis was in prison forever. Marcus Williams' legacy was protected, and Maya and Zoe Williams were finally, truly, completely home. The darkness had tried to swallow them whole, but they had become the light instead.